accept a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion?
Second.
I think Joe got it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, first up, board calendar. Anything in particular with the
No, just, it's there. You'll have an opportunity just on the next item to talk about the engagement. That was gonna be a topic, but, no, I just wanted to have you, Sherry, put in a lot of the big dates thus far that we know for the remainder of the year.
Is anybody else going to Legislative Day? I know I signed up, but I don't know.
I signed up soon.
I signed
Did
up
you?
too.
Okay.
So
I haven't signed that,
That
but
should
I
be
will go.
calendar.
You're going to?
I'll organize a carpool for those that are
Yeah,
interested.
it's actually on the 13th, which I don't think is listed on here.
And I also signed up for an MSBA online briefing on legislation. Did everyone see that?
No.
I did not.
It's at
Came
noon
yesterday, I
on
think. Was it
sometime
yesterday or
in
the day
January.
before?
I
Yeah.
can share that email, but it seemed like it's free and it's just an
Quick
update on what's
refresher
going
or
on
something
in
like
Jeff
that,
City.
Right.
That's okay.
And there's a lot going on in Jeff City, so.
Tell them others to try to think about it.
Okay, we'll get that on the calendar and then we'll organize a carpool for those.
Sounds good. Board engagement with the public.
So I'm still available Monday night if we wanted to try and do something at Lucky's or if anyone thought of a better venue. And Kathy said she would, publicize it on social media. I don't know how much of a crowd that would draw, but is there any conflict with Monday nights that we're aware of?
I could assist you.
I can be there too.
And I'm just thinking, 5 or 5:30 to 7 or 7:30.
At Lucky's?
Lucky's I thought is good because people often need to stop by for milk or whatever, so,
It did seem for the Meet the Superintendent event to be the place where I talked to the most people, There were a few people. I mean, obviously we don't have a large window to advertise this event,
Right.
but there were a lot of people informally, they're like, oh, you're the superintendent, this is what I think, or just, it was a place to make connections, so. Not a lot of window to advertise, but you will meet more people than you will at probably an event, inviting them to come just to you.
And is there a place to sit or to
There
set
is,
up?
Sherry just kind of did a preemptive, they
There's
have a
some
little,
tables in
they have a little
front. There are.
table
Really nice.
fireplace spot.
Oh, perfect.
I think there's a fireplace. And so we kind of just tentatively reserve that.
And since Howard's here, maybe he could alert computer school and Steeker parents, since that's kind
Well, I
of
mean,
the...
if we're gonna do it, we'll
We
let
can
all
do
the
it.
parents out.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, I
Yeah.
think since it's our first community engagement in Rock Hill, that's,
It's in something not specific, yeah, we'll blast something.
I didn't know, Amy, if you wanted to talk about some other items related to that, or the success of this, or
Yeah,
where else we need to go kind of with
Yeah,
that.
This is I did intend that, not just to schedule the next one, but to talk about, overall, what this is what we're doing. I don't know if it's been terribly effective. What else can we do? Welcome your thoughts.
Give me a few more
I'll
minutes.
put you on the spot. Did you ask? David?
So I would agree the turnout hasn't been great, but I do think that it's important to offer something up so that at least people know that they can go and do it. I think perhaps trying to alternate times, alternate sort of venues, but I think we need to have something that's sort of fairly set in stone. I mean, if people know that, the first Sunday we will be there, or whatever it is, or perhaps even months will be at Schnucks and odd months will be at Lucky's or something like that. But if we set something down that is rigorous in the schedule, I mean, if we end up sitting there for an hour and nobody wants to come along, so be it. But at least that way, if there are things people want to come out, we can do that. Also, I would like us, I don't know whether you're planning on broadening the discussion to talk about sort of community, sort of town hall meetings and things like that we have done in the past, more related to specific issues, but whether that's something we're going to try and do once or twice a year as well. I do think that that again, those just give people a chance to sort of to weigh in, to have a different level of contact with board members.
Are there any meeting places in the different attendance areas
That's a good point. I was thinking at Laclede Station and Watson in that shopping
Just,
center
we're
there.
gonna move it around, maybe move it to their areas. And
Yeah,
see, get it closer. to
Where would you
their
recommend,
That's a
Fuzzy's
good
or?
place, yeah. there's
yeah,
just-
Fuzzy's, or there's a couple like sandwich places I
Jimmy
think in
John's.
there. Yeah.
I really like that idea.
Mhm. That's a good location.
Because that would bring in the Shrewsbury folks a little closer for them. Steve?
So what do people think if we do Lucky's, what time works for people?
When is it again, Gene?
Just this Monday.
I could do 5 or 5:30. But people are probably getting off of work at 5, so.
So maybe starting at 5 is a good idea if they
Or start
work
at
close. Yeah. And what
I think
time?
Monday is too soon. I don't think, I think given you're doing something different, I think,
Waiting
I
later.
understand the logic behind Monday because we don't have the board meeting, but I think that if you do it on Monday, I think no one's going to have had a chance to go and see it. And then kind of, if you don't give people a chance to at least hear it's going on, I tend to think you defeat the object of the exercise.
Yeah. And I agree with David, give the schools the opportunity to put it on their websites, send it home to their parents and things. So, so maybe you'll go towards the end of January or beginning of February.
I agree with David that I think you have to send the message that you're accessible and you're there. I mean, the one thing that I think has been consistent over the years has been people have saying, well, where do I go to meet you guys? Or that sort of thing. And this way, if it's out there, and even if you can even get it in like 6-month blocks of this day you're here, and then put that out there so people can get their calendar out and say, well, I won't be able to make this one, but I know I can make that one. And they kind of put it on their calendars. If you kind of do it in like kind of a rolling 6-month schedule as it's publicized, then people kind of have a better idea. It's like, oh yeah, they are really out there trying to make connections with people. And, right or wrong, I mean, there's as many people say that you're unavailable as the same people that say that it's like, well, gosh, you guys are here and nobody's going to comment. Why are you doing it? And blah, blah, blah. So,
Well, if we keep to the schedule at Redco, the first Sunday of February is actually Super Bowl Sunday, the 4th, and I don't know if that would hurt attendance.
It's early though.
There'll be lots of people shopping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
That's a good point.
so if we're going to do that rotating place, that's one that we probably ought to plan out several months in advance to say, this month we're going to be this, and this is kind of this drawing area, et cetera, in that way. So I don't know if we can even start a little pencil of Lucky's, Jimmy John's in Yorkshire, or Fuzzy's in Yorkshire, or whatever, and kind of move there.
See, you know all the eating places are.
I just tried Clover and Bee, it's wonderful, but I don't think it's a good place for us to do this.
Well, I mean, can you?
Gene, our board restaurant reviewer.
Starting in February, can you shine a light out, maybe go, like say, with Lucky's, and then March go here, April here, May. And then, we can actually give out a list of dates versus just one date.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I like
bring
that
it
idea.
to the end, so she can-
I'm not
Will
sure.
you do that for us?
I'm not sure a July date is necessary because it's the middle of the summer, but
No,
I mean, I
for
think,
the end of the year. would be-
I'll just say, end of the school year, and then pick it up at first part of August again, and
I think February, March, and April. Just 3 months.
Yeah, so we don't see any pressing need to do one in January.
Well, if we're gonna do it, it needs to be the end of the month,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And
I
if we
think
wanna
then you
do-
run into February.
Yeah.
Okay. Kathy, can you work with me on logistics once we?
Sure.
yeah, I think March, April, May, and then you can take June and July off and start again in August. Do plan for the rest of the year,
Okay,
August
good.
through December. That's a nice thing that you can actually even put in, whether it's a Facebook posting or Webster Kirkwood Times or whatever.
Yeah.
Gives a little more body to it than just one day.
And if you're gonna continue it the next school year, if you can do the same things, so PTOs and all that, have those dates to announce at the beginning of the school year, put it on the calendar, things of that nature.
Do we want to try to set some dates up, what David had suggested as it related to like a town hall kind of meetings too?
Well,
Or
before we get on off of this subject, so we're gonna do first what? We need to have a consistent, first one of the month.
We've been doing,
first
Are
Monday?
we
First.
sticking with, you wanna do Mondays now?
we've been doing
Or
first
Sundays.
Sunday and early
Or
afternoon, and
Sunday.
I don't think that's a good time in general.
Unless you all have like specific dates that stay away from, we could look at our calendar. Like I know Howard and I, happens to be here, but we were talking yesterday about, he likes to comes to board meetings, which why he's here, but just the conflict with, they always have their PTO meetings on Monday nights. So he can't come, or maybe some of their leadership can't come. And so we could try and find the day of the week that's best for the existing calendar, then maybe proactively for next year, we can
Yeah,
get those on the
that's a good idea.
calendar and people can respond
I
to
really
our
think
schedule.
the 5 to 7, Monday through Thursday, is a better time slot than on the weekend.
For those of us who work,
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, yeah. I could do it at 6, but 5 is just pretty much out of the question.
Okay, well, and again, we can split up and have somebody there the first hour and then somebody else
Definitely,
take
that would be
over, because a lot of these conversations, people
Yeah.
are rotating in and out.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I'm fine with that, Gina, I just wanted to.
Yeah, just we've done, the Sunday afternoon, and the most we've had is what, 6?
We had 13 one summer, that last August.
You did, okay. I thought that was,
Not at one time, but
No,
Right.
passing through still, that's good.
Yeah.
so maybe keeping at least one Sunday, February, keep the Sunday on Super Bowl Sunday, and then after that, try weekdays.
I feel like it needs to be the same day. I think we need some
Consistently.
consistency. We're bouncing around on location. I feel like at least the time and place, or the time and the date needs to be the same.
If you have time in the next couple of weeks, I feel like we could probably get a proposal and bring it to the next board meeting. These are the dates, these are the locations.
Yeah. But for now, I
That
think
would
if we
work.
just say we're definitely keeping with that time and, maybe not location for February, Sunday afternoon.
Sounds good.
As long
That-
as,
we must do
as
that.
long as David doesn't go, because
Do you want us to do that? Do you want us Kathy, Jean, and I to kind of develop the schedule? I mean, would that be?
that'd be fine.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that'd be great. And then on the subject of town halls, you mentioned scheduling, but do we want to, I think it's worth asking, is that something that I assume that hypothetically that's something we want to do going forward at some point. Is there a need for that now? What raised this and what caused you to raise this, David?
Just the idea that just another way to reach out. I'm just trying to offer a couple of different ways to reach out. I think that a state of the district, what's going on, I think that something like that. And that I would think that if we did one of those once or twice a year, that would be
So
about.
it's different from what John did? Are you talking about like a separate board thing?
Yeah, I'm talking about something, yes, more. Perhaps it's the board and and sort of the administration as well, but something where the board is present. Yes, I wasn't thinking of something quite, I was thinking more of something more informal way, have sort of discussion tables and things like that, rather than sort of a formal presentation. That was all.
Well, I know when we had some community meetings and we did an extensive, I think we were trying to get the information for the bond issue and tax levy. We had great attendance. It was
Yes.
a big subject matter on the board.
And they were specific.
It was specific, so I think we could focus in that, the financial status of the district, upcoming projects, what we're doing, just so they get,
Yes, I agree with Emerson completely, yes. That
Then,
it can't just be a come for a random sit down.
Because then it
chat.
just becomes a bigger version of your monthly thing
Yeah,
that
no,
you're
no,
trying to
you know,
do.
It's for, as a board, we think there are specific things, and I think the things that Emerson mentioned
Yeah,
are
and-
among the things that are very good.
Yeah, you don't have to have 6 things on an evening. You can
Right,
just
I mean,
pick
one
2
or possibly
topics
2.
and say, if you'd like to discuss this for the next half hour, be at these couple of tables, and then we'll switch.
right.
That's a good idea.
And
yeah.
switch to another one, and you can discuss the other subject as well.
And there was an
Yeah.
administrator or board member at every
At
table.
every table.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
really the key there, yes.
The enrollment study, I think, is kind of a good hook, because a lot of people are interested in, is, the district expanding or holding steady?
And equity in education's another
That's a
one,
huge
and that sort of thing, and.
I think that would be a big draw too.
Yes.
And I think probably, and you could kind of loop in, and I wasn't able to attend the assembly thing, was it yesterday morning?
Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't able to be there, obviously, because I didn't remember exactly where it was, what time. But, hearing feedback about that, and, because I think a lot of times people tie those social issues together. The common thing being, how are our kids doing, access, diversity, performance, that sort of thing, that kind of, you know, student behavior and student, you know, how are people feeling like they're welcome and it's in a learning environment, they feel like they can come and feel safe. It's kind of all kind of tied together. So that's one big subject that one table or two tables could tackle for half hour, 45 minutes, and people could share their experiences with. So just an example of
Do
something.
you think we could pull something together like in February before people's schedules get more full?
I'll just slow you down for a second. So you guys, is there consensus that you think this is something we need to do now or imminently? I'm just asking, I'm not disagreeing.
I would say if you planned one before the end of the year, I think you're probably doing pretty good.
Not unless you have something structured and ready to prepare.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
We go there with a lot of ideas, and this is what we're thinking about. You know, I think if we got something more focused, I think we'd be in better shape.
And I think there's more planning, so trying to do something like that in February is probably, that would be more of like, I think between spring break and the end of the year kind of plan. That gives you, you know, a month and a half or 2 months to kind of lay out what is really important at this point in time.
It might not be bad to just, again, keep the conversation going if you want, but even just pause on it a little bit, because once we get done with the equity report, and then we share some different, you know, recommendations that I have, some that will certainly involve like community engagement in terms of like process, you know, around like specifically like a strategic plan around equity. I don't know, it might be best to come in at that point.
And I'm kind of struggling, related somewhat to this, as to whether this is a board thing or administration. This feels like an administration thing.
I think, my opinion, you know, I think it's administration. I mean,
I think we would want to be
Be
there
there.
and demonstrate that we're on the same page, but
you know, like when we led the discussion community, you know, Sarah wasn't up there, it was the board members. So
Yeah.
I think, you know, the board leadership and superintendent, you know, I think that's a good visibility. But I think we should build our agenda now through the end of the school year and be ready to roll at the beginning of the school year. I think that getting something together now is just going to be rushed.
I agree, partly because we're going to have two board members, new board members in April as Emerson and I step off the board, and that would be kind of a rough thing,
did you
especially,
decide
I
you're
do.
not running?
Yeah, well, I'm very
You
happy.
still got a week, right?
I'm very happy with the two candidates who have filed, so leave it at that. But the whole idea of bringing that on them, I want to have community input and not to be a one-way presentation at this next town hall meeting. And so if you put a board member at each table, you can get a lot of good input from people, you know, who just have something to share on whether it's equity or, you know, district finances or whatever they want to talk about. But, you know, I think early fall would be a good idea.
Like I said, build our agenda when we discuss the item. This needs to be a community forum topic.
I spilled coffee or condensation from my cup, got on the, I don't know. Well, I do think when you hear, you know, what some of my ideas for recommendations are, and the purpose is to kind of, you know, get your thoughts and ideas regarding some of those. Again, it might be good to jump back into the conversation. I don't want to squelch it now, but.
David, you good? All right. District enrollment report.
Enrollment report, all right. So, I prepared a presentation, helped me with some of the data, John helped me with the data. And also want to, and I'm sure you feel this and know this and, you know, had a conversation, but kind of close the circle here just in order to make this kind of as informal of a dialogue as possible, even though we're in our traditional board room. So that's why I invited the administrators up, so I don't want you guys to be silent as different thoughts or ideas come your way, just like, you know, just kind of inviting all of us to contribute thoughts and ideas. So what I did is we pulled together the enrollment data, and it kind of jump-started from Charles Calfron, who you guys commissioned a couple of years ago to do that data study. Took us a long time to get the 2016 birth data, but he ultimately did get the birth data and kind of redid the projections, which is that massive report that got tweaked a bit when I noticed a few errors, and I sent you the original one. So I also thought, just for our benefit, as we get an understanding of enrollment in the school system, I included a few other groups, and I think you saw those, which were the students participating in VIC in the schools they go to in the grade levels, the children of our non-resident staff that come here through the policy that allows them to bring their kids, and where are those children right now? Children who attend the school outside their residence area, so our board policy allows if these certain conditions aren't in place for a child who lives in the Avery attendance area to go to the Bristol attendance area. And then, because as we're thinking through different enrollment and space considerations, where are the children who currently attend computer school, the resident children, where are the areas where they're coming from, okay? So I'll go through this. I know you've seen some of these graphs already. If I need to slow me down. If you have questions, again, just go ahead and ask questions. I threw out these as prompts to guide your observations or reflections as we go through. I included some highlights of these with all except for the implications at the end, because I didn't want to jump the gun. I wanted the board and everybody to share their own thoughts. But what do we see objectively in the data presented before us? What data do we not see? What are some assumptions possibly we can make from the data? And then now really what do we do as a result? What might we do? As I sent out in the email, here is the updated kindergarten projections. The data for 2022, just like the last round of data, does not include the last 5 months of the year for that particular group, okay? So the last 5 months of 2016, that birth data isn't in. So that's 7 months worth of accurate data, and then projections based on trends of the following 5 months. You with me? Mm-hmm. So one of the examples of, I think, so that number will change. Somehow that will change. The numbers before it will not. That number will change somehow, certainly.
John, how accurate was he on the 442 from last year? From the projection to actual?
You know, it was fairly accurate, but I will say that in one of the slides at the end, I highlight that the projected number of kindergartners at Avery School,
He underestimated that.
he underestimated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could get that number though. God, I used to have that. So as you look at this data, everything from the red line to the left is actual. Everything to the right is projection based on the latest birth data that we have. So you can kind of see, and as a reminder, what he tells us to really, all the data has, he projects all these different things in different ways. He said for our use, we should look at the mid projections as the thing to look at kind of the trends moving forward, which is that red line. So you will see again, in terms of kindergarten enrollment projections, you will see kind of a, we spiked a little bit, we dipped, and then we're moving up.
What is the mid projections from those high projections? It wasn't that much of a gap.
Not always. And as a reminder, this is resident enrollment. So this doesn't include students who are VIC, students who are coming to us, all those other some of those other categories that I put. You will see actual resident enrollment right now at 4,321 in K through 12. The projection is to move to about 4,500, a little over 4,500 actually in about 5 years. This shows the elementary trend line, moving up a little over 150. 6th grade center, it's above where it historically was, but it's not a lot. It's not a lot, at least in this 5 years of data. And the thing to remember as we look at these, this is Hickson, kind of the same thing. It's gone up, it's kind of leveling off, but you don't see the effect of those kindergartners coming that way,
That's what I'm
right?
gonna say, we don't see that effect
You don't
of
see
that
that.
spike.
Right.
Because it didn't go out another 5 years.
Exactly. Here is the high school. So, so the example I gave is Arnold, his projection for 17-18 for Avery kindergarten enrollment was like 520, his resident projection. But the actual is 554. So again, we don't know, how many kids moved in. We don't know, we're not allowing staff kids to go there. But obviously there's it's pretty big, it's a lot of kids at that school. The birth data definitely shows a trend down, but again, that's just looking at the birth data.
So are we keeping track of like people who move in from out of district?
Yeah.
We don't right now.
Really?
So
Okay,
we don't. It's something we could do, that
Yeah.
could be something that we do.
that's kind of a
So,
wild card.
Yeah, it is a wild card. It's one of mine, what we don't know, what data we don't have currently. This is looking at, so the next slide represents kindergarten enrollment projections. And again, a little bit of a decrease there. Bristol is remaining approximately the same. Kindergarten as well. Clark, Edgar Road, and Hudson is where you see upward trends. This is the current resident Clark attendance, number of kids in that area, and you could see they project 5 years later to be up at 405. Certainly at Clark and Edgar Road, we currently have modular units that have some of these kids. I will also say that currently we have most of our elementary school classrooms based on, the district is always committed to low class sizes. We set standard levels for class sizes. Majority, Sandy, would you say 85, 90% majority of those are at or above that particular standard that we set? Just for some perspective, we don't have a lot of smaller class sizes. Certainly historically, that average keeps going up. So again, looking at Clark, this is currently Edgar Road.
You're still allowing children to go to Clark who weren't in, for whom that's not their catchment area, aren't you?
Correct. If there's space.
Sure. To what extent? I'm just trying to. To what extent do you think that growth is driven by the fact that you've basically got a one-way traffic? That largely, if you're trying to go to Clark, there's a number of places you can't go to, but yet more people can come into Clark. Do you think that's driving things at all, or is it literally just sort of the number of homes with young families that are moving into that catchment area?
I think so. I do think it's the number of families that are moving in. I believe, although we could look at it when we get through, I think more kids are actually leaving Clark attendance area and going elsewhere than are coming in.
Okay, that's
think.
interesting.
For instance, Avery kids, there's 0 going to Clark.
I think.
Okay.
So Edgar Road, you can see, Edgar Road currently, and Bruce knows this, and they're kind of going around talking with people about different space considerations. Certainly as we do this big report, comprehensive study, that coupled with enrollment, we'll have a better picture of our facilities and our use and stuff like that. Edgar Road currently has pretty tight, pretty squeezed. Again, this is their kindergarten projections. Hudson also. So Hudson resident enrollment is 204, but Hudson currently has about 230 kids at it. It's certainly a lot of things that they're doing there are drawing a lot of people to want to go there. Plus they've traditionally had space. So we'll see like staff kids that are sending their kid, like we'll say if there's not room, you can't go, And so they see a high number of people that aren't resident students, obviously, that want to come to that school. But if the residents then shoot up to 240, certainly you don't allow as many other kids to go there from outside, but still that space starts to get a little bit tight. And again, yeah, the kids born there, it's increasing. These are our computer school students by the resident area. So from the Avery attendance area, you've got 10, 12, 15, 17 kids that go to the computer school. And you can kind of see Bristol is kind of the biggest catchment. That attendance area, while we know Clark and Edgar Road, there are small little attendance sections that have 50 to 55 children in kind of the North Webster neighborhood that currently go to Clark and Edgar Road. The bulk of the children in that area, proximity-wise, go to Bristol. So it's not surprising that some of those kids who choose to go to Bristol, and it could be for the programming there, it also could be for the proximity there, we don't know. But again, as you think about, in the past too, as you think about, where can we find space? What can we do? These kids wouldn't actually absorb if something was ever decided, to do something different there. Reports in the then those kids would go back to their places. These are our current children of non-resident staff. So our staff that live outside the attendance area. The district's committed to not sending some to Avery. Sarah had some people that weren't upset with her, or were upset with her. I had some people. Most of the people are really gracious. They understand. Yeah, it'd be nice if I'm the counselor or a teacher there to have my child in the building so they don't have to pay for Adventure Club. But again, most of the people overwhelming are like, I'm just fortunate that I get to bring my child to the school system. So this kind of shows the placement for where all those staff children are.
I know there aren't many, but does this include SSD staff kids?
It does.
Does it what?
Include SSD staff kids?
I think there's only one or two, isn't
No,
there,
no,
Sherry?
there's just a
3 or 4.
3 or 4, sorry. So the numbers are fairly consistent with what we've seen all along. Obviously, some are a little bit less, only 4 kindergartners. But then you have a big group like the second grade, where you got 11. VIC data, you've seen this VIC data before, but I don't believe we've shared it broken down by school. Again, as we're making these placements, the VIC students, as well as the students who come from Normandy and Riverview, John works with the schools. We've really made a conscious effort in recent history to make sure we're grouping the students together so that they are, with one another, so that as they come to events, they could be with one another, come together. Just a conscious effort for that, and these are where those children are right now.
John, the quick question on the computer school, for many years there was a lottery to get in. Has there been more applications than space in the past few years?
Still is a lottery, and I would say that, I can't speak exactly, how it's new. Howard, have you seen any?
Because it's 122, isn't it?
Well, I was looking at the class sizes, and there were none of those that hit over 20. So presumably, whilst you may nominally run a lottery, everyone's getting in.
But the problem is if kids leave, they don't know that there's an opening, so there's nobody to fill the slot if the family moves. So that's why, third, fourth, and fifths often have vacancies, especially fifths. Nobody wants to move to a new school.
There's still children that are turned away. There are still some times where, again, you're right, that's something, actually Howard and I were talking about that the other day, about, how to advertise and, how to make people aware of the school that's right in their community that they can go to without, just trying to make that available, the choice available to people with proximity and stuff like that. So we always have more kids apply for the school than not. I don't know if it's to the same level as it was originally or historically. I don't think it is, but I don't have that.
I would venture to guess that it probably isn't
Yeah.
considerably higher than or in fact, it wouldn't be near as high as what it was at one time.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know if we were, basically looking for kids to say, hey, we've got, like in Jean's situation she mentioned, you might have a third and a fourth and fifth grade that have a declining number of kids, and then it's, then maybe you look at the kids, the people that maybe move into the district that have a third, fourth, or fifth grader and say, hey, while I know you might want your third, fourth, fifth grade to go to Edgar Road or Clark or wherever it might be, but we do have a spot at the computer school that opened up when somebody else left. You could certainly fill that slot for the remaining 1, 2, or 3 years that your child has through in their elementary years.
We definitely do not, at this point, obviously not discouraging anybody to go to the school, but there's not anything in place where we're making people aware of numbers or advertising it from our level about the opportunity. So that's something we could definitely do and would provide, with some of the openings at computer schools, some space in the other schools.
Yeah, it seemed like it would be specifically effective for maybe some of the kids who would be going into or be at Avery or Bristol that, are really chock full of kids.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I know it's not fun to move in the middle of the elementary years, but we do have spots open up in computer school at 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. Would anyone like to consider that?
Yeah, yeah. And we do keep, and they keep lists at the school level, as to like, you know, when there is a list, a waiting list. We keep lists, so we have a staff member in the district who has been here, she's great, she's a social worker, wanted to bring her children here and wanted her children to be in one of our schools that's more diverse, so that, you know, be in a community that's reflective of them. And so she didn't want to go just as any school. Well, unfortunately at the time, the schools that have that level of diversity already were at their cap. And so she was a non-resident staff, we were already at the level cap, sorry. These are the spaces that we have available. But when I found out through working with the computer school that a child had left the school, I contacted the school. They said, well, there's one other person on the list. We're still waiting to hear back. And long story short, we were able to make that arrangement work. And the staff member's child now is at computer school because we had an opening. So that could be something that we definitely do better.
Just go back on that. So that was the Vic numbers on the prior one there. Can you remind me again what the maybe John, what the intake has been for the past sort of couple of years in terms of sort of new Vic students coming in? And where have they been coming in then? Because I mean, I'm just looking at this where it's, you know, the last 3 years is 221. They've been coming in spread across. So we've had some coming in presumably at the high school, the middle school level then?
Right, yeah, so with the computer school, with kind of the bylaws or whatever you want to call them of enrollment for them, there's some language that says there will be 2 spots for our VIC students. So the 2 that you see there would be the 2 that we've designated for kindergarten. So then the other 3 we place where there's space availability. So it's mostly been freshmen the past couple of years, incoming freshmen.
All right. Okay. So basically, though, our expectation is that we're going to bring in 2 big students a year in the computer school, and that's at the kindergarten level. That's going to be it. Anything else is going to come in. Okay.
And it's been that way for.
No. I just as I was looking at it, I just sort of really wanted reminding as to how that had worked. That was all.
Now, the slight caveat to that is that with the VIC preparing for the sunset of that program, is that school enrollment is adjusting down throughout all the districts. So our numbers for the foreseeable future will be 4 new VIC students instead of 5.
Our district had made a conscious effort years ago to start to scale back in preparation for that. And so that's one of the things. So when they made the decision to cap the number of kids that you had, they looked at your last 3 years or last 4 years and then calculated the number. So you still have, especially in Rockwood and Parkway, that maintain a lot of kids, hundreds and hundreds of kids. You know, they're seeing the least amount of reduction.
I think it's interesting just looking at this, and you know, it sort of drove home to me looking at this stuff, looking at this, and then the staff members coming in. You know, as we're saying that, you know, the schools are getting sort of very crowded and whatever. And if you look in terms of the numbers, I know that when we talked about did we need to go and expand the space that was available at the elementary level, did we need to rethink sort of as part of, you know, that aspect of the last sort of proposal. I know that one of the questions came, well, hang on, are you just going and putting in space to go and so that you can go and take in, you know, students who weren't in the districts or children of non-taxpayers and whatever. And I know that was one of the things that came up. I think this is it's very good to sort of see this, and I do like the way, you know, I like the way this is prepared, just to sort of really say, look, you know, we're saying this is, you know, the need is at the elementary level, and by the way, you know, if this is your concern, look, this isn't, you know, we don't have an extra classroom that we've got, you know, that if we didn't make these various provisions, it's not like that at all. It's
right. This
is very small, and the growth is much bigger than that. So I think it's good to get this out here.
Yeah. Thank you. Resident children attending an elementary outside their residence area. So I did this. We did this by school. So this is where the children. This is where they live. The little geographical area. Those are the schools that they go to, and then the grade level that they're in. The process for this is they submit a letter to the superintendent's office, And then again, we consider things like, obviously current enrollment and the such. We also consider if you have a family that has a 3rd grader and a 4th grader at the school, they've been there for 4 and 5 years, and now they have a kindergarten, our practice has not been to deny that family necessarily. I don't know if we've, in my short year and a half, I don't know if we've had a conflict actually where enrollment was already super high in the incoming kindergarten, because it's hard to project kindergartens. You really don't know. But I don't feel like we've added a child of a family where we were full. But we don't necessarily have a hard, fast practice of saying that we would do that. So that's Avery. Bristol. Residence area, Clark. Residence area, Edgar Road.
Hey, back up. Well, there's several Bristol students going to Clark. And I remember years ago it was because there was people unhappy. You think that's the reason for people unhappy with Bristol? Or is there a proximity reason some of them prefer Clark?
I think it's proximity at this point. Maybe those choices were made 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't know if they were, due to unhappiness. Proximity-wise, I know that my neighborhood is a little Bristol wing neighborhood. You have to drive, if you drew a straight line between my neighborhood and Bristol, you would go through Clark attendance area. So when I got the job, Brent Underwood's like, and you move, your kids will go to Clark. I'm like, actually, no, they wouldn't. So we're closer to Clark. So I do think that there is a proximity thing there. Again, we haven't gone back. Our practice thus far has not been to go back to Clark and say, okay, Clark attendance has spiked residentially. You've had your children in there from Bristol for 4 years, you gotta leave. That hasn't been the practice. That doesn't make me feel good. Just saying.
But you still go through the exercise of having people write a letter and
We do.
explain, you do.
We
And
do.
so what's the explanation given when people, to Gene's point?
Yeah, I would say they're all different. Most of them are, again, I've only seen the letters for the past year and a half.
Sure.
I think,
Sometimes
Sherry,
it's-
what would you,
A lot of them are people that have moved in and they talk to neighbors or they have friends that they've met and they go to a different school. So they want their children to go to the same schools and they
As someone who did that initially, I will tell you that from being from Shrewsbury but going to Clark, it was almost like going from one end of the district to the other. It was because of after-school care, because my daughter went to my parents and they lived where I grew up, which was in the Clark district and literally around the corner from the school. So it was just easier to ask Dr. Gustner and say, hey, would it be okay if my daughter went to Clark, so that way my mom or my dad can just walk over, grab her, she'll be there at their house for the rest of the day. So it was, and after a couple of years, it was actually almost just a formality because we were so involved and that sort of thing, so.
It sounds like it is a formality. I had the impression that years ago there had to be a reason for it. It sounds like now, I'm not sure why we even ask for letters, because if you write the letter, they need to go.
yeah.
Only
Only
if
when the
there's
attendance
space.
started getting
Yes.
really tight, when the schools
Yeah.
started getting really tight, that's when they started making strategic decisions. I can't let anybody else in Avery. You can go
Like
here.
we've made.
But I did have to write the letter.
Every
I
year.
mean, I did have to make the request, even though it somewhat became a formality for us because of after the first couple of years. But it was one of those things because the comment to me was by both Dr. Gustner and then subsequently Dr. Underwood, which was, this can always change, so make sure you do have a good reason and write the letter.
We had a resident who's not necessarily excited with us because at this point, and you feel like you're being a little bit, I don't know, tough, but, we have our reasons for it. We didn't, their childcare is by the Avery attendance area. The Avery's full, and so you can't so you
Well, that
kinda
was
have to
always
kinda-
the caveat,
you know what I'm
was that we
saying?
had to have room.
Right.
That was always the caveat, because that's what even Dr. Gustner had said to me was, if all of a sudden we have all that post-World War II housing turnover in a couple of years and we explode over Clark, you may be going back to Edgar Road or Avery, whichever were, wherever you were.
We
supposed to
haven't,
be.
I haven't, my year and a half, full disclosure, I haven't given, we always say that, like, we send them a letter, you know, even like with staff that submit their things, like,
I've never gotten a letter.
yeah, yeah.
I've never written a letter.
Well, I used your email this year. Sherry and I talked about it. I said, we didn't share, Amy and I had a dialogue, conversation, so we'll use our email, because we said, I didn't actually get.
I didn't even remember that we were
Yeah,
still supposed to do
yeah,
that.
so we do communicate out to the people that are in our records, but again, our records are what our records are, so we tried to jump off what we've had, but we learn, sometimes we learn of kids that are going there and they never submitted anything to us, and we're not checking all the students in the population necessarily, so we're kind of jumping off the data that we were given and trying to do our best to keep up and as we make these decisions.
Yeah, one of the questions I had, and it's probably one of these at the end, but if everybody went to their own home school, what would the attendance numbers be? And because that's kind of the, you know, just from my perspective, you start in your attendance area, and childcare is a great reason, you know, especially if grandparents are watching kids. Everybody has an after-school program, I would presuming, but, you know, childcare would be a great reason. Now, I know parents are like, you know, gee, my neighbor's kids go there, so you ought to go there too. That becomes very nebulous, and it becomes a real catch bag for the district down the road, because then when do you say no? And I don't want to be a real extremely hard on this, but I think there has to be some real good reasons to let people switch schools, because otherwise you can let anybody go anywhere.
What happens if you get more letters than you have spots? So if
Right.
5 people want to go to Clark and you only have space for 3,
Right.
is it whose letter got there first, or do you look at what the rationale is, or does that not ever happen?
I don't know if that's happened. Have we prioritized that, or
It
has that
hasn't
happened?
happened, there's very few
Good question.
new, most of them are continued, so they
Yeah.
just write each year.
You know, I'd like to say that to everybody, hey, you know, all of our schools, all of our classrooms are great places to go.
Yeah.
So go to your home school.
Yeah.
Enjoy your homeschool neighborhood and your homeschool teacher.
Well, that was kind of the whole point. I mean,
Right.
that's why neighborhood schooling is what we were trying to stress for when we were looking to possibly make the Steger building a community school. And, you know, and like I said, the only reason for us was the childcare.
Which makes a lot
Other
of
than
sense
that,
to
we
me.
would have been at, I think we were supposed to be at Edgar Road, but I don't know, kind of to look back 27 years, our real estate list.
Let me just say before Gene goes, Arnold, if you look at the resident projections and then you subtract, you know, you subtract staff and you subtract Vic and you subtract, you know, some of those things, like these are just the residents that would be at Avery. If all the kids in our catchment, in the Avery catchment went to Avery, you'd have 554. So that's what that data represents.
Yeah, and that was another question I had, because it seems like that missing element is the number of people that move in. So it's like, if you got this formula, it's 554, okay, you got your resident people that you've already counted, you've got your Vic, you've got your
Yeah.
transfers. What's that nebulous number that nobody knows about?
Yeah, but this represents
This should actually would be that.
actual. So these are the residents. What it doesn't do is say
Break it out.
our projections
Okay.
don't help us.
Okay.
You know, because we don't know who moved in. So if the projection for Avery at the end, 2022-23 is 522, we don't know how many people are gonna move in between now and then. We don't know how many people are gonna leave between
Right.
now and then. But the 554 is actual in existence, living there today, going to our schools. That's what the number would be. If we did not add Vic, we don't add Vic to it, but.
So that's just the Avery attendance area? That's
Correct.
not anybody like from Clark or Edgar Road going there?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the actual
So that's-
residents
so-
living
so the
within
kid-
the Avery drawing area.
Okay.
The kids that go to Clark from Avery, they're part of that 554.
Okay.
Because they live, they're in this catchment and they go to district schools.
So the Clark and the Avery, and the Bristol people are in that?
Yes. If they
That's
all
the
went,
attendance
if
area
they all
number.
went back to Avery and they all went to where geographically they're placed, that's how many would be there. Before you add staff, before you add Vic, at those schools.
Gene?
So, you know, the study is basically showing none of our schools have additional space to handle this growth. But there is a question, you know, it's always the big dinosaur you don't want to address, of redrawing some of those boundaries. To me, there seems to be some tweaks that need to be done. The Edgar Road and the geography in North Webster is bust.
The two drawing areas.
Those are kind of crazy. It sounds like your neighborhood is a little bit crazy. Is there a way to look at when proximity is a reason for requesting another district to see if there's some reasonable changes that we could propose to neighborhoods? Because it seems like Bristol is the one area that's going to be flat, and if that's one of the areas where a small tweak might make a difference. I'm just wondering, when should that conversation arise, or is there additional research that needs to be done to kind of fix the oddities in our current boundaries?
David, is this related to
I was
that?
going to say, let Emerson go first, and then I'll...
Bruce, you can jump in too with some of the stuff.
Okay, and I'm piggybacking on Gene, Steve, and
Arnold?
on, what needs to be said, what's said is that we need to look at the attendance area all the way around. I don't know how many years it's been since the attendance area has been studied to see, where those lines are now. Two, Gene, just making tweaks, I don't think that's going to be effective. We need to look at the entire process. Arnold, the issue is already caught up with us. It's here. Pushing it back down the road is not going to help it.
Right, right.
So looking right now to see if we just do a preliminary, if we retweak the boundaries, this is what the attendance areas will look like. Then you have a better projection of what space you'll need in each one of those elementary schools. But then you're going to be solving areas and questions about diversity.
Right.
There's a school, there's somebody in the school that looks like me. Because I know years and years ago, we achieved diversity by busing kids from North Webster to each other elementary schools.
Yes.
Right.
That needs to stop, and we
Yes.
need to make that correction.
Yes.
So, this enrollment is just giving us the tools to go back and start looking at the attendance areas. It needs to be redrawn, recreated.
But it seems like we actually need more space.
We need more space,
Yeah.
but we need to see
So-
where it is.
Yeah,
It
that's
could
one of
be
the
that
things that
we have we might need a whole nother elementary school in another area.
Right.
Right.
But we won't know that if we keep on tweaking and making small changes.
And one of the things that we're looking at now is we have a template set up that shows what the desirable and the maximum enrollment capacities are at each of the schools. And now we're plugging the new enrollment figures into that model to see where those tight spots are, and if in the elementary level, as a level, if you combine all of the spaces district-wide, are we within those capacities, or even withdraw, even if we wanted to redraw attendance boundaries, if we're over the capacity of all the elementary schools combined, we're still going to have a space issue.
But I know it would be a question I would ask you, if those lines are redrawn, how would your model look then?
Yeah.
It could be completely different.
I was just going to say, if you're going to think about redrawing boundaries, and I agree with Emerson, tweaking doesn't get it done. It will cause a lot of angst if you say you're going to do it, so you want to do it in one step and do the whole thing together. I think you've got to go and sort out your question in terms of, what does your total space need, and what are you doing with the building we call the computer school, and with that whole area as part of that. I don't think that you can go and tweak, and then I think you've got to go and solve all of those things together. If we are saying, we're going to go back and say, look, we needed the additional elementary space before, we still need the additional elementary space, we're going to set this up as a community, another community school, you do that as part of that, and then the redistricting becomes all part of that whole exercise. I don't think you can do them in little bits and pieces.
Right, and it's going back to the model. And, it might be in a whole nother building we need somewhere.
Well, that's right, yes, I mean, to Bruce's point, that, if everywhere is above capacity, then going and moving everybody back to, where they would naturally be, well, you're just shuffling around, shuffling around the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, it's not, you're not
3
changing
closets of
underlying...
stuff and 3 closets to put it in, and you're not changing
Yeah.
capacity.
Well, and considering too, is that, the class size standard has been what it is, and it's low. It's not low, lower than everybody in St. Louis County, but it's low, and it's certainly lower than some, and so there's also, what's the level of priority to the class sizes, at all those levels, and it's because you could certainly find the space and keep the sizes low, or you can increase number of children in the space.
Right.
You know, I know that maybe the community would help us have to decide the priority in that ultimately, but and I like what your point is, because right now you've got 122 kids at computer school, and they would go back and they would push the envelope on already big.
Well, and just because you study it doesn't mean you're fast forward ahead to make the change. You're
Okay,
actually just
no.
taking a look at it, and that's probably the stress that you make out, things that you stress to people is, look, we're just looking at this. We've got this study which prompts a lot of different things. We're gonna be looking at a lot of different things. Yes, in a couple of cases, we might have to kick the can down the road before we actually do something, but we've got to actually at some point in time decide, we just have 50 widgets and we got room for 40. We got to make room for 10 more plus widgets. It's just, it's the way it is. You can use what, I don't want to say bags of dog food or anything. You just have a certain amount of space in the existing buildings. Do you add on? Do you build?
Well, I think the can's been kicked because of the portable classrooms.
Yes.
Right, that's been the can kicker. And the problem really needs to be solved. To Emerson's point, you know, and I don't have mixed feelings about it, but there's goods and bads. You know, there's goods in that we have, what I'm going to use, the word integrated our schools, okay? There's bads that we're busing kids to do that. The bad is kids have to leave their home neighborhood to go do that, which is, I don't think is a good thing. And I would want kids to be able to walk to their school, if possible, and walk home, rather than bus clear across the district. So I'm in agreement with him that I think at the time, because I've been looking at old board minutes from the integration time, that was something to integrate the schools, but who integrated with whom? You know? At that time, whites did not integrate with blacks. Our North Webster students integrated with the rest of the population, which was good, but maybe we should have integrated our teachers into the schools at that time, which is a podcast that we listen to. So I think that's another factor that we need to come into to look at. We need to look at all of these factors as we determine what we need to do and what's best for the students and the community overall. And it's great to have, if I go to Clark or Bristol or any of the other schools, that I do see children of color coming in, that I go to school with children of color, and I don't want to necessarily isolate them in one school, but at the same time, is that fair to the kids that we're moving to go to another school? You know, those are really some issues we need to kind of grasp.
Those hard questions, those hard topics will be addressed whenever the attendance boundaries are resolved.
Yeah.
I don't want my kid going over there. I don't want that. I mean, you're going to hear a lot of a lot of excitement about that. You know, but that hard decision must be made.
Right.
Yeah, I was in 6th grade when they redrew the boundaries and created Hickson and Steger as the 2 middle schools, and Plymouth became part of the high school and everything. And it was not an easy task.
Angst.
But I will say that, I mean, geographically, while North Webster has changed somewhat, you're still going to be faced with a lot of the same diversity issues.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. You have to just accept where people are and the makeup and deal with it. But I do think you're going to have some issues where you're going to have about 6 different things, and everybody's going to be, it's paralysis by analysis. It's like, okay, what's the most important one to deal with first?
Right.
And so, but I think the one thing is that, well, let's at least make the first step of where's our capacity, redraw the lines dotted, move them a street. I even brought up the list because I was curious, I couldn't remember from 20-some years ago. My backyard actually divides between Edgar Road and Avery. My neighbors to the backyard, they go to Edgar Road, and our daughter would have gone to Avery if we didn't move to Clark. So that's the kind of thing that goes on. You're going to have people, and we've had a few years ago, we had the one person who was trying to push to maybe get their street moved to Brentwood. kind of thing. I mean, you're gonna have issues where the kids across the street are on one drawing area, and, you know, or the
Right.
backyards. But there has to be a line.
Exactly.
I recommend this be an agenda item for that community forum that we spoke of, so we
Yes.
bring it to the
That's a
community.
great idea.
As we kick that can down, there needs to be hard target dates, you know, that we're gonna kick it, and this is when the attendance gonna be reviewed, when we're gonna look at this, so we have those hard dates for the community. There's nothing we can kick down the road 3 to 5 years, because otherwise they're gonna be facing us. So you
Right.
can see right by the attendance survey that it's something that we need to do like right now.
Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry.
I just have a question. So I'm very mindful about what Emerson in particular is saying about the busing. Currently, if you had parents who didn't want their children going to a school that wasn't the one closest to them, they could of course go and ask via letter to go to a different school. Do we know if that's
We
happened?
have to revisit that policy as well.
No. But I'm just wondering, do we know how much that is happening at the moment? Or are people largely going and saying, look, this is where the district has told me to go, and so I will just go with the flow?
And I'm going back some 25 years now, you know, my kid had the option of my children had the option to go to Avery
Yes.
or to Edgar Road. You know, we went and interviewed with
What was your attendance? Like, what-
Avery or Edgar Road.
That was, yeah, they were part of,
Okay, I'm sorry.
And
part of
so
that
we went
weird
and talked to
little-
whoever was the principal at Avery, and then we went and talked to the retiring principal before Pam got there. You know, and so both of them was like, we want your kids here, we want your kids here, you know. And I looked at the wife and I said, they want us here because we're black, or they want us to here because they offer a better educational, you know, environment for our kids, you know. So, but we did go to Avery, because actually when, I can't remember the principal's name that retired before Pam.
I don't know.
Palmer, yeah. You know, he was retired, so I went back and talked to Pam, you know, and then we made that decision. So they had an option, we had an option, I don't know if that option is still there. And-
yeah, your drawing area is actually Edgar Road now, by the way it's actually on the map.
There's not an option right now.
Okay.
I wasn't offering, I just wondered how much people were taking advantage. One other thing, and I'll leave it to Arnold's point where he wants everybody to go to their neighbourhood school. I think that ideally, if that's what people want, it's great. But I do think that it is a plus to the district that we give people, where there is space available, this freedom to go and to choose to go somewhere else for whatever reason. And I think it's it worries me a little if we start saying we're going to start really restricting that. I do think it's something I hear from people saying they like that it's available. Most people don't take advantage of it, but nonetheless, it's sort of a little freedom that they think, yes, you know, they've actually gotten. I think it is positive. I think if we look at where the movement is, it changes by, you know, some years somewhere's more popular, other years in other places more popular. Avery's never going to have room, we know that. But I do think that fluidity is a good thing. And I would like that to remain available. If most people go to their neighbourhood schools, it probably is better, but don't restrict people.
Yeah, and back to Arnold's point, you know, I think the first thing we need to see is if we put everybody back in their home school based on where they live, how would that look?
Right,
Then you start making decisions from there.
right.
Not only number-wise, but diversity-wise, too.
And that's really a different conversation too, in terms of the context that boundaries, school boundaries occurs in, which can become, I think, important if you're making attendance boundary decisions based on those kinds of objectives, where you're trying to establish neighborhood schools and kids are going to neighborhood schools. That's something that's already in place. Kids are already there, the neighborhoods are already there, and you're trying to achieve that goal. When you talk about attendance boundary adjustments based on enrollment projections, that's a totally different kind of a context, because that hasn't happened yet. That's a projection, and I can tell you from my experience at Francis House School District, which was a growing school district where you could see subdivisions going in and development happening, it was still a very charged and emotional kind of a conversation to have, even though people should know that moving in, that this is a growing district and these changes, if new schools have to be built, and when new schools are built, adjustments have to be made in attendance boundaries, and it was still difficult. You come into a community, a stable community like Webster Groves, where there's not visible new development happening, and you're talking about making attendance boundary changes that have been in place for a very long time in a stable community on projections and kids that haven't even happened yet and that are projected maybe to happen 3 or 4 years into the future. That's going to have, I think that's going to have.
It's a different kind of
more
stress, right?
ripple effect in terms of community reaction to that than you might anticipate that would have. We'll have board members who filed a run for the board based on that issue alone, I think. So.
And as I mentioned, there will be some difficult decisions, some difficult conversations that we're going to have.
Yeah.
And so your comment for me is phase 2. You know, we see where they are now, what school they'll be going to, attending, if we put them back where they belong. Now we know what our projections are, how those projections are going to affect those same attendance areas. Then we start making plans.
Yeah.
I think everyone knows this, but just throwing it out there, just the need to be strategic and thoughtful and thinking how some of these different things all align. Like, what are the steps? Like, we're doing this work towards equity, you know, and we are a neighborhood school district, but we have children in a neighborhood that don't go to a neighborhood school. So like, not everybody benefits from what is like supposedly what makes us special. You know, Ed Johnson always is so beautiful because he always hates when, you know, when anybody groups district community, and he's like, well, what community are you talking about? You know, and so he always likes to use the language of neighborhood and say who's making, you know, what are the neighborhoods or communities that you're making decisions to, who's benefiting from it, essentially. So I think we have to be strategic in all the steps, get the data, here's some information, this is what schools would look like. So I think we need to, and we can work on kind of a plan somehow that we create to kind of the strategy to do it, but I do think it's important to do. I think it's all related to inequity. I think it's related to numbers and what's happening in schools, and again, the type of place that we want to be, so.
Well,
But you can't make decisions apart from this data. This data was not available. This is data I've never seen before. This is data I don't think the district had accumulated. Am I correct?
We did the first study.
Well, the first study, but I mean this kind of stuff.
he's talking about 5-10 years ago, correct?
Or
That's what
no,
you're-
yeah, and even saying how many non-resident students from
I
staff
don't think
go to
it's been
schools.
reported.
All of that stuff, reported. So that's all data that's part of making some really good decisions. And if you don't have the data, your decision's only as good as the information that you have. So I think that's part of the thing with talking to the community about this is many of these things, and I'm not trying to point a finger at this, that's not my point, but it's like we're trying to solve an issue and now we have more information. And there's other things that have come into play now with the equity thing. Let's talk about the conversation here, and let's just not set a boundary and say that's where it's at, because that's not a good thing to do. That's never popular. And changing boundaries, like Bruce said, there's always angst involved. But it's not like we're building a brand new school and we're going to say its capacity is going to be 450, because that would really cause angst. And maybe that's what we're going to do. I don't know. So, but there's things that we're dealing with and we're going to deal with that have been issues that we've we've put Band-Aids on rather than deal with.
And we'll still have to answer those questions. What do we
Yes.
do with the computer school? Will the 6th grade center remain the 6th grade center? Do we still need to add on to Hickson to make that a middle school? So all those decisions come back into play. We've already had two excellent programs on board, what we was going to do with Hickson and Steger. And then the work that Hudson started doing with the, the renovations. They started implementing some of that already. Or where are the other elementary schools in that process? Are they doing the same things as Hudson? When you start making curriculum alike in all the schools, well, yeah, I will go back to my home school because I like what they're doing.
So in North Webster, where there's no neighborhood school, how do those kids get, do we provide any transportation, or is that just on the family?
We provide transportation to the children that go to
You see, it's
Edgar
a little
Edgar Road
finger
and Clark,
in.
right?
Clark. Kathy,
Or bus.
is that on the website, the catchment, like it's on the app? That shows the kindergarten attendance areas?
These little areas.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so,
Some
but
of
I
those are
don't know.
best.
So
It's a little pocket.
We also have kids in Glendale and Morrisville that go on.
It's in the same
True.
presentation. Yeah.
True.
That's how I ended up in Clark,
Yeah.
Glendale.
It's also
True.
on the website.
So we provide, not all the parents access that, but I had somebody give me, for purposes of this meeting, just more information. We currently have 50 children that ride the bus to Clark and Edgar Road. So the way way those little fingers are set up, you've got Clark and you've got Edgar Road, and actually further away is Bristol. So in order to get to Bristol, those Bristol students have to walk through, if they walk, Clark and Edgar Road. And then they get into Bristol attendance area, and then they get to Bristol. So even, I'm sure it was based on, I don't know, maybe it was based on numbers, maybe it was based whatever, but even if they could have just moved that Bristol catchment area to be a part of the,
Right.
so anyway, so I do feel the same way, and that I do feel that it was, I'm sure they thought it was well-intended when created, but I think it was, the benefit was to the people that were white.
Right.
And we do have situations, with, talking about other different inequities where we provide transportation to and from the school, but suppose there is an after-school
Right.
event at Edgar Road and my parent doesn't have transportation, or the car's with my dad in this one particular situation who works, my mom doesn't have transportation. I either get on the bus or I gotta walk home or I gotta find a road. And I'm 8. You know?
Exactly.
And it's like, that's not how school should be, especially
And the
in
parents
this.
can't participate in anything at the school either. They're not
Right.
going
And
to
then
that
causes-
house.
How come my participation in grade night is so
Right.
low? How come they don't
Uh-huh.
come to the PTO meeting?
Right.
It's because
It is on the app.
Well,
It's
what
awesome,
Arnold
yeah.
had said earlier about having this information and presenting it to people, while it might not necessarily soften the feelings about it, it is something that where knowledge and information is very powerful in at least presenting the rationale for looking at it. And, while it won't be, I won't judge whether it's the most important thing or the least important thing or anywhere in the middle, but I always keep coming back to the fact that having lived through that, the biggest change was really more for the parents. And when kids move, it usually takes them about 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, Mom, I got a new friend. Hey, Dad, I'm hanging out with so-and-so at my new school. The kids seem to be much more amoeba-like, and they wrap themselves around their new situations a lot better than the parents do, because the parents are the ones that are like, you have now tried to take my family and my existence away. And that's where your emotion comes in. And granted, I'm not the person who's lived in an area where my child goes by the bus somewhere else. So I can't tell you what it's like to live in those 3 drawing areas that are not contiguous to what the school that they go to now. So I can't tell you what it is, but I do think that a major factor will continue to be capacity, and that can't be pushed down the road because, again, we have so many spots in so many schools and we have a lot more kids coming. So that the district facility study that Bruce and the building committee are putting together and going to present later this spring, right? That's
Yes.
the comprehensive plan. That is going to be a big factor in what we can and can't do at every site to make room.
But that's a part of the stuff.
I'm saying part of
I'm
it.
just saying
Yeah.
that what Bruce and his committee is going to present is how it looks now.
Right.
And maybe based on this data. But if the attendance lines are withdrawn, Bruce and studies probably have to start all over again and do it all over again.
Well, it doesn't change the facilities of what they are. It just tells you, this is how many we have room for now. And the actual data that falls into it is, we have room for 550 kids in this building. Right now, the attendance says we got 530. In the future, the attendance says we're gonna have 600. but it doesn't change what our capacity is right now.
You draw the attendance areas and you put people where they belong, you're gonna have one area that might be just bulging at the seams, and this area down here, they have capacity.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, those are the conclusions you'll probably come to.
But it won't change your
I
state.
don't see
Just to
capacity
clarify
anywhere.
Well,
what
that's,
that-
I don't either.
Just to clarify the study, it's a facilities condition assessment. So
Right.
we're going in and assessing the condition and the need, maintenance and replacement needs of what exists. We're not drawing judgments on capacity and space, we're just going in and assessing.
But we know how
condition.
big
Well,
each
based on
school
your
is.
comments earlier that you said, you was talking about
Yes.
making those movements, but your
That
You have another.
Study
you have
just-
other-
capacity is already out there.
You're
and
just talking about the
study is
condition of the
not
building,
done.
what it needs to be brought up to make it more livable.
More to keep
Sustainable.
to
Improve it.
keep up with the infrastructure and maintain it
Gotcha.
properly.
So,
Yes.
so stated, great.
Yeah.
So I think it's, we are the ones that will ultimately, from all the information, so that study won't necessarily lend us to the decision,
Right.
but, you know, this is enrollment, this is capacity, these are district goals, this is equity, and ultimately this results in the decision.
You just got your agenda and your timeline.
So let me make this comment too, when we're talking about capacities, based on the numbers that were put together last year that we're now updating for this year's numbers, the desirable capacity at the elementary level was 1,889, I believe, students. The maximum capacity at the elementary, 1,899 desirable capacity. The maximum capacity was defined as 2,089 K-5 students. When we looked at the study, and just to kind of put this out there, when we got our enrollment projections last year, so we're not this year's study, but last year, the enrollment projections for the elementary school was projected to peak at 1,990 in 2021-22, which was the last year of the enrollment projections. Now the last year of the enrollment projections, because we're a year later, is 22-23. But the year 21-22 in this year's enrollment projections that have been updated for that same level is 2,070. So we've gone from 1,990 that was projected for 21-22 last year to 2070 this year, an increase of 80 students.
Right.
Where did that come from? Why did that happen? And I don't know the answer to that, but that makes us a lot tighter when we look at what our maximum capacity was. 1990 was kind of in the middle of desirable and maximum, seemed manageable. It was 5 years out at the time, nothing to get too excited about. Well, now that that's been bumped up to 2070. it's
You're within
almost
19
been-
kids of max.
Yeah, we're within what we used as maximum. That maximum was somewhat arbitrarily defined as 110% of desirable. Can that be fudged or tweaked a little bit? Yeah, probably so. So it's not really a hard maximum. It was just a maximum defined for planning purposes. But I think that we have to be careful about establishing a trend based on 1 year's worth of data and 1 year's worth of change. Because when I look at what happened and where a lot of that change was, it's at the kindergarten level. Well, why did that happen? Did it happen because of new families moving into the school district? And even if that's the case, when we look at the housing market and what was happening with turnover of houses in general in the economy, that could be a 1 year blip, and that may not be sustainable in the long term in terms of the housing turnover. Another thing is, this is the first full year that people knew in advance that we had tuition-free full-day kindergarten, and how many kids did that attract out of other situations when there was a tuition associated with it, especially when we look at the bump, that bump happened to occur in kindergarten. And so what had happened in the past was there was a big jump, a relatively big jump from 1 year from kindergarten to first grade at that next year, because there were a lot of kindergartners that went to other arrangements, but then in first grade, when it was a full day, they came back into our school system. Well, when you look at the enrollment projections, that K-1 bump is still built in. I don't know that it's actually still gonna be there.
That's a great
now,
point.
Because we got it at the kindergarten level, possibly, instead of the first grade level.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to get too excited about the bump in the enrollment projections yet. I would like to see another year or two.
Mhm.
We're not pushing maximum capacity until 21, 22 and out there anyway, so there's no compelling reason to try to do something too quickly based on projections when there's factors out there. So, you know, I think that's all, would all be part of the discussion.
What's your maximum capacity?
At 110% of desirable, 2,000,
89.
2089 is what you'd said for elementary.
yeah.
So this year, just from some context, actual enrollment, we're at 2,072 right now. So we're close to what is that if you include all enrollment.
Well, and my thinking about waiting and seeing is that, let's say we get there and all of a sudden our classes are at maximum, and then the process of trying to build isn't something we can do overnight.
Right.
So I would rather anticipate it and than to have it sneak up on us. I mean, I
You want to be
understand. your point.
prepared.
And I'm having deja vu, because we had this conversation
Oh, I know.
maybe about 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
we're gonna wait and see what the projections look like, and the can is still rolling down the road.
Yeah.
We need to put a nail in that can, and nail it to the road and start
And
making.
we're still using those modular units that we
Yep.
weren't gonna use for.
I think one of the things, when we take this to the public and have a conversation, that I know from my perspective, if I looked at this, I would go, okay, they're gearing up for something. And that's the last thing I think the public wants to know, that you're gearing up for something like that. That maybe giving this information out every year as a standard, maybe as part of the district thing that you did, John.
State of the district.
State of the district. Because when, I just know how some of the public feels, and how I feel about that is, okay, when you start hearing, you know, the districts having people come in and talk, and you're doing all these things out there, it's like, okay, they're gearing up for something. And you better have things lined up, really good data to make sure that is successful. And I don't think people want to know that, gee, we're going to gear up for something if there's, like if there's a real need and they see it and we present it that way, or we present the equity thing along with that, you know, that's a good thing. They see the value of that. But I always, you know, over the course of my time in the business, it's like, you know, when you start throwing that stuff out there, people automatically, you know, that's what they think. And
But don't
What do
give
you
me
mean by
out.
gear up? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's planning, which is what we should be doing.
I understand that, but what the public, this is part of our responsibility and part of the administration's responsibility. But at the same time, the only time, and this is one of the reasons what David said and what Gene said as far as us getting out in the community, is that the only time they hear from us, and people are not, they're just going to think one-track mind, that the only time they hear from the Board of Education or the administration is when we want something from them, and we want to reach into their pocket for something. And that's not the case, because we're trying to be responsible with this. We're trying to be responsible with making sure our schools are not overloaded, that the programs are consistent between schools, that kids are not having to go clear across district if they don't need to. We're trying to be responsible and correct some situations that have been there in the past and maybe have been left. But the perception for some people will be the other one.
You can't stop people's perception.
I know that, but we
you
can do
know,
what we can to
you have-
make sure that,
You have a strategy, and, you know, it's like, and you have to plan. You have to plan for it now. Because all of a
understand
sudden, 2022 is going to sneak up on it, and you still don't have anything done.
I understand that.
And bottom line on it for me, you know, some of these people that have the perceptions, they've been privileged. And, you know, that's going back to what John just said, you know, that it's just because they were white, this is the way they want it.
Right.
But that's why we're here.
My response to people.
That's why we're here, so that we can make sure that everything is done in an equitable fashion. And we don't want to, like I said, it's going to be a difficult conversation and it's going to upset some people. But we must move in a strategically methodical method. And if we do that, and see, here's the data, here are the facts, you know, and here are the options that we have to repair the situation. That's not hiding anything from the community, it's letting them know what it is up front. And if they want to keep their perception, they just have to do it.
I agree with that. This data, this is why I said what I said. This stuff never existed before.
Well, this is the second time we put it out at
No,
least.
no.
And we're trying to put this,
You've
that's part of what we're trying to do, is to get this out every
Yeah.
year. So it's not a big surprise, and it's not the only time this comes out as a gotcha. It's
Exactly.
every year you get this redone every year, so you know what's going on to help you with that planning.
I know we did that study last year, and I know the study was done, what, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10
It
years
was
ago?
done
Actually-
internally before.
Yeah.
But,
It
but,
was-
but I mean,
Last
this
year
was
was the
last year,
first.
this is why we pushed to go and get it out, sort of.
I understand. I'm not talking about last year. I'm talking about, you know, the transparency of the board and the transparency of the school district and the administration is extremely critical to the trust of this community.
Yes.
And the more we get this information out and say, we're giving you this, we're letting you know what's going on in our schools, rather than, this is the honest opinion that I have. Okay, there's data that's coming out, there's a meeting, they're gearing up for a bond or a tax levy, okay? That's the impression that many people get in the community and in all school districts.
Yeah.
And I would rather that the Board of Education and the administration give this information and say, hey, here's our annual report, this is where our attendance has been, and people can see, we can go back and say, no, we've been talking about this for the last 5 years. We know we've had an issue with this, we're gonna have to deal with it, we've got these portable classrooms, let's deal with it, let's have a conversation about this, let's have a conversation about busing kids across district. We don't wanna have those
But isn't
conversations.
that what we're doing right now?
We are, Amy, I'm talking about when it hits the papers or things like that, and you can never control the message, but you can focus people on what's important and not have them come to conclusions that are not valid, okay? Because people, an unvalid conclusion with if this data went out would be, they're gearing up for a tax levy or a bond issue. Well, maybe not. We don't know yet. We haven't even come to that conclusion. We're gearing up to take a look at information so we can make sure our schools are not overcrowded. That's what we're doing.
I think there would be a very large section also that would come out down the road to say, well, why haven't you been looking at this?
Yes.
And in reality, it was, yes, we are looking at it.
Yes.
This is a perfect example of how we look at it. We are doing our due diligence, which is what Amy was saying. You know, and to my response to people that say, oh, the only thing you're doing is the only time you come to us is when you want something. My response is, well, you're choosing not to look at what we have been doing.
Yeah, I'm
You
fine with
can
that.
say
That's
it,
good.
that we weren't there doing it, but we were. You just choose not to. It's like saying that pen is blue over there, but you don't have any blue pens. Well, yeah, it's been sitting there.
Right.
You know, but you just choose not to look at that. And to me, those are the people, that small group, but unfortunately very vocal, that in the past has not given one rat's tail
Yeah.
about the school district until it's time to pay their tax bill and until the time it comes to an election.
Right.
Then all of a sudden they get up in arms about it and they create websites and they put out misinformation and they fight against us on it, but they don't give a care. They haven't given a care.
I don't think that's completely fair.
But I feel like we've been held
There is a
hostage
very
by that
small
voice.
group that out there, and they were
Since
very vocal the
2000.
last time,
Yeah.
that did not care about the school district until their tax bill comes and until we came out and tried to do something to improve our facilities, to add to our facilities, and then all of a sudden, because where have they been since? They went back under their rocks.
Okay, so I guess what it says, let's not suggest that everybody who opposed the tax levy.
No, that's not what I said.
Because, I mean,
That's not what
you
I
might be able
said.
to pick on one or two, but I will assure you that we've had people who are vocal against it, who have sat here, in fact, they're the only people who've sat here in school board meetings. You know.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that.
So
I
I think,
wasn't- yeah.
I think there's a danger,
I know, but I'm gonna go next.
there's a danger that we need to be very careful about how we think about people who don't necessarily agree with the view that the board develops. That's really what I'm saying.
I'm not casting aspersions at anyone, but I do feel like we have been held hostage to some extent and have been somewhat stagnant in response to the voice of a few people. And that's, I would like to see us be more progressive and not be afraid to do what we think is right. So,
Yes, I completely agree with you. I mean, we're here, and you're here in a position of leadership, and the reality of leadership is that you make unpopular decisions a lot of the time. And you shouldn't worry about making unpopular decisions. I mean, yes, the perception is wrong in terms of why we're getting this data out every year. That is a fact of life, you know. But let's keep getting the data out there because it's the right thing to do.
Well, and we have been transparent, and I agree with all of the data. I agree with that. My whole point in the conversation was how we put it out there, how we generate it within the community, how we talk about it within the community, how it's released. Because sometimes that becomes a sticking point for some people.
And that's why strategy is most important when we use this, when we start using this data for something. Everybody was speaking on the same methodical tone, same message. You know, we're going to do this, and this.
And hopefully you can stop the misinformation then too.
Yep.
Right.
I think if you're not careful about how you put it out there,
Right.
then you end up with the.
So, my point all through this, and I acknowledge that we have to be careful with strategy, Arnold, is this is now a public document. Anybody who looks at it will say, oh, we don't have room in any school, and Bruce's numbers to me are really stressing that by 2022 we could be 200 people over capacity at our elementary schools, roughly.
We're almost there right now.
We're almost
Based
there
on what
right
I
now,
said,
but we
yeah.
could be
actually,
200 over the 110%. And that is an alarming figure that very much seems to me to be a fact. If anything, I think this underestimates, again, the growth, because we can't capture how many people are moving into the district when they're ready to start a family or they have small kids. Is there a way to capture that, to say this is the next step that the board really wants to investigate, of which attendance areas have the most potential growth based on relocation?
Well, there are exhibits back there.
He does not look at anything except live births.
That's okay. That's the start.
Yeah, I mean, that's a start, so I'm just wondering, is there a next step where we can somehow talk to
I don't
realtors
know.
or?
Occupancy permits, I don't know. You know, I don't. We'll explore that.
Because to me, that's the
Seems
piece
like
that's
hard
missing
data.
from the data.
Yeah.
Where
It's,
did
it's
the
hard to
extra 80
analyze
kids
when people
come from?
choose to move in and move out. It's hard to analyze. I mean, a lot of people said, I mean, my mom's 88. There were people that would have said she would have died or moved out of her house 20 years ago. She's still there. You know,
Right,
so
but
it's really
So
hard.
what's the factor?
And
Is
his
there a
number,
5% unknown here, or is it higher than that?
well, and Bruce admittedly said the maximum that you use is somewhat arbitrary based on a number times a certain percentage.
Right.
Well, you could say, well, there's rationale for saying it's 115% of that number. There's also rationale to say, you know, it's only 105% of that number.
But
And those
Avery
changes,
had
those,
to add a new kindergarten class at the last minute this year. That's
Right.
the unexpected factor we have to deal with, is there's not another room, and this happens again, where are you gonna put these kids?
Well,
You're gonna
that's
have
where-
to spread them around the existing rooms,
and that's
right?
where the capacity of planning space says you plan for more than you need, but not exorbitantly more.
David?
Can I just ask one question? So Bruce has made the point. Previously, we've seen a bump from kindergarten to first, and it's probably related to paying for full-day kindergarten. Now we've seen the bump there. Do we know if, in Charles's projections, if he took that into account, the fact that we had a switch in the paying for kindergarten? And I don't know that we've got an answer right.
He adjusts his cohort survival rate with the data. with
To
the
take
new
into account the fact that kindergarten was now covered, whereas it hadn't been?
Correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
But
And I-
theoretically, that number would stay up a little, since you would think
Sure.
that more people would continue to be here. So it would be higher than the past if that was the reason.
Well, no, because they're going to come in either at this point or they come in a year later. And it's, you know, let's say you've got 100 people who are coming in either at kindergarten or are coming in at first. Now, possibly you'll have some people who started off in kindergarten somewhere else and say, I'll stay with that other thing that's not there. But I would guess that many of them, it's simply delaying an action for a year.
Yeah, and when I look at the data, I mean, he may have been aware of that, but when you look at the data, because you've got in the report, I mean, you can look at the report and see what the difference between kindergarten and first grade was at the elementary level every year.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be based on actual, and that jump each year has been 11, 12, 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah.
But it still continues to be like 13 or 14 going out into the future. Well, that might not seem like a lot to go from kindergarten to first grade, it's a 13 bump. Well, once that happens and we bump that up to first grade, that then also goes to second grade the next year, and third grade the year after
Right.
that. So after that happens for 5 years in a row, all of a sudden you got 65 extra kids.
Yeah,
My-
I had a quick look and it didn't look like it had, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
It didn't look like it had come through. So to your point, you almost want to see what's going to happen and to see how that really is playing out. I mean,
That's
your point really resonated with me, that's all.
Yeah, my point was only that if before you had 300, and now because you're full-day kindergarten, you have 320, probably theoretically, every year now going forward, you're probably going to have closer to the 320 than the original. It's a one-time jump up, but then you're probably going to, average is going to be higher going forward.
Can I back this whole conversation up? Okay, we need to kind of focus, and Dave's leaving.
I apologize. My daughter is, I had not, when I said this was a good day, I had not realized my daughter was going to be leaving for college today, so I need to get out of here.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, and I understand what the outcome of this conversation is. We want to look at redistricting. We want to look at that sooner rather than later. Is that consensus?
What I'm thinking is we're still in kind of data collection mode, information mode, with some of the different things that you asked us to
We
collect.
want
So,
the data to consider redistricting.
yeah.
I would like to see, if we expanded the computer school, what those schools would look like. If we would put everybody back where they live, what that would look like. And then we can look at the attendance boundaries at that time, what they should look like.
Okay.
That's a good plan.
And then we're looking at, I guess, I mean, I don't know where to go with the enrollment report. Like is there a time by which you think it is going to be necessary to do something in terms of building, or do we just not know that yet?
I don't know enough yet. So that's why I want to say is let's look at, what are the numbers? What happens if we shift everybody? What happens when we put our figures into what Bruce is saying about that particular simulation? Are class sizes at this level still priority? We have a goal of maybe eliminating those fingers, whether that we say that now or not. But I feel like we're still in kind of a data collection mode, and let's think about how all this lines up to not inform a decision, but like the decision predetermined decision,
Right.
but to get people's thoughts as we need. And I feel like there's,
You know
what I'm saying?
The effective strategy, you got to get the data.
we know that we haven't, we know that we need, like you said, I mean, enrollment has continued to go up. We have certain goals that we want to achieve, so we don't want to just, again, keep putting it off. But I don't think we also want to proceed without, again, more information and.
I also remembered considering enrollment growth and the need for space and all of that. I don't necessarily want our decisions to be based on maximum capacity in our
Right,
classrooms.
right.
I
Right.
think smaller classroom, it was something that really just anecdotally drew me to this district,
Yeah.
and it's gone in the years that my kids have been here.
Right.
The class sizes have just,
I agree with you.
and that's something that we have to decide as a board, that's a priority. And we want to ask for this, if we get to the ask point in
Yeah.
the community, that this is something that we think is worth.
Yeah, more space creates the ability to spread your constituents out.
So I don't want to just be going, I don't want us to just keep saying, we're about full, so we need to do
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Let's, how about, what's ideal? And we may
Yeah.
not get it, but let's
That's a good-
Be
look at what it
proactive.
is.
And that's part of the strategy that we want to keep, is that one of our strategies, we want to maintain class space here.
Yeah, and we've already let it slide higher than I'm comfortable with, but that's my opinion. David?
Yeah.
Can I suggest that for a future board meeting, preferably fairly soon, we talk about whether we should be establishing a board subcommittee to look at this and to really concentrate on this? I think we're going around in circles a little bit now, but I think that if we could, so I think if we did another board meeting, we sort of said, let's think about, does it make sense to establish a subcommittee? Is that something I could suggest at least?
I'm in agreement with it now.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure we need another meeting. We can do
I
that
think
right
we
now
can-
if we think it's worth it.
I think it would be a good idea. I'm just not sure we've got an hour to go and discuss whether or not we should set up a subcommittee, that's all.
Does anybody not, what would be the downside of that? John, I'm asking you really.
Well.
I don't want to interfere with what you want to do.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. There's still data and information that's, that we don't have right now. So I prefer to do it when we have more information.
And when will you have that?
you know, as far as space in schools and enrollment size, I mean, it's probably something that wouldn't be too hard to compile in a couple months.
Could
you know,
we
with all
appoint
the-
I think your subcommittee's
members?
actually going to
thinking-
want to have input on what other information do you need as well. I think that saying here's all the
We could
information
do that.
is almost
I
a
mean,
step
that
too
would
late.
be-
I think it's a broader issue than that covers a lot of things.
I mean, that would probably be valuable to have like policy subcommittee, a separate little space where we come together, some people, and talk about some of this. That would be good.
Okay.
I'd like that, actually.
Well, and I keep coming back to Bruce's thing, but if they come back at some point in time and say a section of this building needs to be completely torn down and redone because, you know, you're affecting capacity.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's a factor in the process as far as what the condition of what we actually have.
Okay, why don't we talk about that issue?
Yeah.
And is anybody not willing to be on the subcommittee? Okay.
I'd love to be on it, but I'm
We'll
not,
talk.
I'm one of 7, so.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Okay. I apologize that I need to leave. I did warn you guys that I was
Send
going to
out
have
for
to.
Sarah.
Done with this topic?
What, you have a family to do stuff with?
It's,
Okay, let's everybody take a short break now while we're at sort of stopping point on this one. Like, take 5 minutes, sure.
Bio break.
Equity piece, I want to kind of set the tone by sharing a clip. Starsky Wilson, the Reverend Starsky Wilson, came to speak to all faculty at the start of the year. Can you turn off all the lights? Probably need all the lights off if there's enough natural light. Starsky is the head of the Deaconess Foundation, which is a non-for-profit that gets money into the hands of children that need it and services that benefit them. He's also the church pastor. He was also selected by the Governor Nixon to be a co-chair of the Ferguson Commission. And so we asked him to come and speak with faculty just on the topic of equity and organizations with equity. And he's dynamic. I kind of clipped an hour and 20 minutes down to about 15. So we'll share this presentation. I know you've read all the different things that I presented to you on equity. I'll touch on some of those. If you have questions, we could ask them and then kind of respond to a few other things, and then that should be it. Again, it's a little bit choppy where I had to cut, but you'll get the gist of it. But he speaks to a lot of what we're talking about. Error. No, I've already tested it.
it's now 0 minutes.
Maybe COVID.
That's a trick, yeah. Try it again.
I'll frame it like this. I'll frame it like this. That's civic language. Can I go to church language and talk about it? Can I tell all the church's business for a second? We've always done it this way. These are the things that pastors hear when they come in and actually want to do something, actually want to change something, actually want to make something different. There's the evolution and planting of an organization, there's the building thereof, there's the establishment of the organization, there's a period and peak of thriving. Now, there's a period and peak of thriving and things seem to go really well, and the challenge, which you should always look for when your organization is thriving, after it's been established, when your program is thriving, after it's been established, when your church is thriving, after it's been established, is you listen for nostalgia. Well, I remember when on Sundays, the Sunday school was full. I remember, who's from the South? Anybody from the South in here? I remember when all the stores were closed on Sunday and everyone was in church. I remember when the children all came to school ready to learn and they were excited on the first day. I remember when parents came to all the PTA meetings because they didn't have 3 other things to do, and everyone, 1952, and 2 people weren't working in the home, and so one of them was always, usually the feminine one, always available for the PTO meetings or to engage in the women's club at the church. I remember when it wasn't so hard and you didn't have to have pizza and you didn't have to have trinkets and you didn't have to the city. I remember when it didn't require giving away Schnucks gift cards to get parents to come to PTO meetings. 1952. And most of us in this room really don't remember that. We remember when it was a little easier than it is now, but we don't remember that. And if you kept looking at me, I would say, I'm not your neighbor. I'm not even in your neighborhood. Turn to your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor. Say, neighbor. Oh, neighbor. It's not 1952. They didn't get it. Turn back to them. Say, neighbor. Oh, neighbor. It's not 19 anything. Much of what we celebrate, not just within our organizations and our cultures, also in our classrooms and with our modes of education. We celebrate 1952. First thing I learned in 2014 is most of the things we celebrate are rooted in the past. The second thing I learned in 2014 is that we can't make it to child well-being unless we pass through racial equity. Now, let me say this. I'm going to use and lean on the words of some of my friends from PolicyLink, based out of Oakland, California. If you are not engaging in the work of racial equity today and you work with children and say you work for their well-being, you are engaging in work avoidance. Work of thriving children. We can't do the work of making sure the definition of child well-being is making sure that all children, each child, is able to develop as children their age and stage should, have what they need to be productive adults and enjoy being kids. Now, you can't serve all your kids if you're not serving 22% of your kids. This requires something of us. And to say that we are is to not be truthful with ourselves, and to not engage deeply for that 22% is to engage in work avoidance. I can't be working for child well-being and not do racial equity. That's the third thing I learned. The second thing I learned. Third thing I learned, I said it was not going to get easier, it's going to get harder. The third thing I learned in 2014 is that for us to engage in transformation, some things have to die. Some languages have to die. Some rhetoric has to die. Some programs have to die. Some careers have to die. Somebody laughed. I'm not going to say who laughed. I'm not going to say what they were laughing about. Things that have to die. I'll just name one. Achievement gap. A quick death. Can we just murder that? Just stab. Achievement. And I'm not talking about a gap in students' grades. No. I'm talking about the language of achievement gaps. There is, of course, an opportunity gap. The language and rhetoric of achievement gaps that focuses responsibility on an individual child to test them based upon their scores rather than assesses the supports and systems that we place around them has to die. We must talk more about opportunity. Y'all know this stuff. You must talk more about opportunity gaps and be thoughtful about systems and supports as much as we are mindful of standards. I didn't say relieve ourselves of standards. I said we have to assess as much the systems and supports as we do our standards. And so what does it mean to be thoughtful about what it takes to get a child to the standard versus thinking about and talking about how the child is not meeting the standard or how the parent doesn't meet the standard because they don't come to PTO meetings? What are the supports that are required? I do point to, though, a continuum that some call DEI, but I like to talk about it as DIE when I say die. DIE, die. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. I talk about it in this way. When I say things have to die for the sake of transformation, I'm suggesting that we have to walk the walk on the continuum from diversity through inclusion to get to equity. Diversity is critically important. I talked about my business, now we talk about yours. It's a problem. It's a problem when you serve 22% people of color and 6% or 7% of the workforce in Webster Grove schools is people of color. How much do those students trust, let down their guard, to fully engage a space that doesn't reflect who they are? Bottom to the top, top to the bottom, all the way around. This is a critical issue for us, that our workforces must reflect those whom we are called to serve because it gives us a relational capacity to actually do our work. That's just diversity. That's the first step on the continuum. Diversity is first, and then comes inclusion. Diversity is about the variety that's in the room. Inclusion is about not just who gets voice, like people say, who gets voice, but I recognize in moments like this particularly, it ain't about getting something said, it's about getting something heard. Communication is about who gets heard, not who gets voiced. Inclusion is about who gets heard in critical decision making in the context of a community, in a system, in a classroom. To make a decision that who gets heard is critically important as we talk about getting to equity, because equity is not about what you can see in the room. And equity is not about a conversation or a dialogue. It may require that, but it ain't about that. Equity is about outcomes and assuring that the outcomes, that the life circumstances, that the grades, that the opportunities, that the life expectancy of children who come to us with challenges are not determinable, are not predictable based upon their race, and I would also say their zip code, their gender. Please tell me your name.
Sarah.
Sarah asked, what do you propose you do in an institution when you run into individuals who put up resistance, don't believe in privilege, I didn't catch the last part, but I think that's the spirit of it. I don't believe they have any personal responsibility to address inequity. There are two things I believe in. I really am kind of an OD nerd. First, I don't believe you need leadership unless you want change. You don't need a leader if you don't want change. So I think the task of leadership is overcoming the challenges and resistance to the agenda that is best for the collective. So it is the responsibility of leadership to address those situations and those challenges, and that must be done openly, and there has to be an authorizing environment for change that, quite frankly, in many cases, helps that person or that set of persons who feel resistance to that change to feel the pinch of isolation. Right? It's a cultural matter, and leadership sets culture in that way. So I think you got to have an authorizing environment, and when you run up against that, you have to be able to, as individuals working in the environment, you have to be able to point to leadership and point to the culture that's moving in order to help to either convert, align, or effectively marginalize, because some things have to die, people who are putting up resistance. I point to the song again. The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. Right? There actually is a challenge where we have to rise above that kind of resistance. And I say this because there will always be resistance to change. What do institutions do? What do systems do? Systems seek stasis. They want to go back to what's comfortable. Systems don't desire to move. And so there must be resistance if there's going to be transformation. So I'll also say, embrace it. Because if you're actually dealing with resistance, rather than people who are just waiting for you to go away, if you're actually experiencing resistance, then you're winning. The culture is changing. You're actually experiencing the transformation that's required if you're getting resistance. Not just, and I really am, not just like people checking out. I mean people who are resisting. That actually is a sign of progress. So just get taller. Yeah, the question is, what can I do to let people know, particularly people of color, know, students and parents, know that I'm with them, that I care for them, that I'm fighting for them, and how can I engage them in ways that are productive, life-giving, and she didn't say life-giving, that's my word, but that's, I feel you though, right? Yeah, we there, right? So I think part of it is showing up in non-traditional spaces. Right? So what does it mean to be there after hours in someone else's space? It doesn't mean always go into the house and all kind of restrictions against that kind of stuff if you're not in a certain program, right? But it does mean, if I know these kids, someone asked me this morning, so your son played baseball at an elementary school near mine, because my son's playing in the Webster Grove District, even though we live in the city. And so what does it mean to show up on the baseball field where those kids play on a Saturday when they don't expect you? Or where they practice in a time when they don't expect you? And those things actually matter. And I think those experiences of showing up, those experiences of a quick note about something that they didn't think you were paying attention to matters as well. That's totally off the books. Non-academic dialogue with parents and families things that are not about the books, not about the school, not about the classroom, and showing up in non-traditional spaces, I think are critically important. Audacity would be the first. This is particularly children of color. Let me tell some secrets here, so the black people gotta give me some license. And I'm also going to critique how we raise black kids in middle-class black families. The kids that you call good are the kids who have learned the mastery of environments that oppress their natural tendencies. They have learned to master not being themselves to be somebody else. And I have 3 children that are great at this. It's a great challenge for me. My oldest son can read any environment, figure out what the adults want him to do and do it. People love it. I look forward to figuring out who the hell he really is. I taught him that though. And I taught him that to try to save his damn life. The audacity to be oneself is fullness, is thriving, is flourishing. But that requires an environment that will receive me as myself. And so if we really wanted to give children something, particularly children of color in America, give them audacity. And recognize that audacity is dangerous, which means we gotta change everything else. Can't change anything. This is Chet Cantrell. He serves Christian Activity Center in East St. Louis. He says he serves the best children in the world. The Conference Project is over there in East St. Louis. He has the best children in the world. He recognizes that you can't change anything until you change everything. If children, particularly children of color, will have the audacity to be themselves in a Charlottesville, America, then we gotta change everything else. That means self-esteem. That means you don't start the day by sitting down and doing a quiz. You start the day by jumping around and doing cheers and chants. It means that's actually a viable and vital way of learning for you. And it also means because I want to be heard, I don't just want to say stuff. It means I have to learn to teach you rather than teaching you how to learn from me. Right? Audacity is the first thing. But to help the white kids to be inclusive and open to the diversity in the room. Now, the one clarification I'll say is, this is a need for them. So I interpreted it before I said it. I'm sorry I didn't reflect exactly the language. But I'm going to suggest, in the America that they are growing up in, cultural competency, affirmation of diversity is a necessity for them. Otherwise, they end up carrying tiki torches in Virginia. And I say it very seriously, and I don't say it condemningly. I say it to say they will not have what they need to process the realities of their world. And that kind of rejection and resistance that is manifest in dangerous ways, and no matter what of many sides you're on, that was a dangerous circumstance. And they need the capacity to embrace, to understand the diversity that is. It is. That's why I don't like celebrating diversity anymore. It is. Didn't nobody do nothing except have children. And what is this? So you choosing to expose them to resources, images, textbooks, videos, all the multimodal sources of education that you use, you exposing them to things that are global, especially honoring that people of color are the global majority. You exposing them to things with people of different hues and colors is requisite for their acculturation into the world that is. And if they don't get it, they will actually believe that the house they grew up in or the predominantly white school district they grew up in is what the world is like, and it's not. And when they run into that world, they will react to it in manners and ways that are not healthy. And so I think one of the things you can do is being very intentional, no matter what the complexion of your classroom is, think about what the world is and make sure your textbooks, resources, videos, and everything else reflect the world. so that they're getting ready for that world that they're rising up into.
That's a great point. I love that.
He is amazing. He was absolutely amazing, and it was fun to kind of talk to him afterwards. But so one of the things I just kind of want to start that off, because again, it demonstrates, the type of learning opportunities that we're trying to bring to our faculty, and also messages that we support and endorse. So a lot of our work, so we do believe that, I read something recently in a book, how it talks about, you have to do strategy work, working with kids, but ultimately if you're just working on maybe a teaching strategy, which we need to do, you're having an effect on a single child or maybe a small group of children. But when you look at an organization and the systems and the structures that are in place for equity, you're impacting all kids. So not just children of color, but all kids. And so that's one thing I think over the past year and a half, I don't think, that we have tried to do is to look at, again, not just those strategies in the classroom, the micro strategies, but what are things systemically and structurally that we can do. So again, I'm gonna have some recommendations here in a little bit, so anyway, so I think that's where the change comes through, and that's why so what I wanted to do is just kind of present, and I'll have these guys jump in and share a little bit about yours, and just, you've all had a chance to read. If there's any particular ones that you want greater in-depth conversation on or clarification on, that would be great. Certainly from a curricular standpoint, we have been doing a ton over the past year. We've been doing a lot in all areas. But some of the different things that are highlighted, again, looking at access to opportunities. And a big focus at the high school has been, how are we providing access to opportunities for all kids? Knowing that, we still have this, while we've been making a lot of gains, school system is still inequitable, curriculum still looks more white, resources still look more white and such. So we're working curricularly, we're working on resources, some of that is in here, but then also the access piece. Traditionally, a lot of the courses at the high school, and Chris touched on this, you had to have, whether it was a teacher recommendation, or it was a grade, or sometimes you had to have a grade in a course that wasn't even naturally tied to a different content-based course. The example being, you had to complete algebra in order to get into this particular science class. And she has worked with different people to really disrupt that and eliminate any unnecessary recommendations or prerequisites. Now, yeah, you still have to take algebra before you take algebra trig. But that has been explicitly eliminated from course handbooks. They are going to have a course selection week, even just changing the language, where it is something where the kids will be, they've always gotten a chance to select their courses, but a lot of times in the past, teachers have recommended them for different advanced courses and such. And this is going to be a much more collaborative process where the teacher may still have a recommendation, but the child will openly get to choose what they want. In the past, parents who kind of challenged that or fought that were given the opportunity to have their child try that course. But again, I had to be a parent that knew that I could push the system, not just accept the way it was. So there was a lot of layers of privilege within that. So we're making that fully transparent to the students and to the parents that if you want your child in the course, the child can be in the course. So that's a really good thing. Introduction of a lot of courses here. Again, that's also transferring down to the middle school, and we want to also look at all of that, and I'll talk about a recommendation later of how it filters all the way down to the elementary school. One of the things that we're doing at the high school too, and we're also encouraging it just even with gen ed classrooms at all levels, and it comes back to kind of what we talked about with the Edgar Road and Clark attendance areas, is how are we, especially when there aren't a lot of children in color in a class or in a school, how do we get them in groups? How do we make sure that they're all in a group together? Because the mindset for some used to be like, oh, let's have, one in each class. Like treat them like commodities or something like that. Again, I think well intended, but who was that intended to benefit? The children that were white or didn't look like them or didn't come from the VIC program or the such. I had a discussion with a parent earlier in the year that talked about, which kind of jump-started some of this, about his child in an advanced class and talking to the teacher. And, she was the only child in a science advanced class, the only child of color in this advanced class. And she wasn't somebody that was ever going to say anything, and she was doing fine. And he said the teacher was really good about it, thankfully. But teaching the child that this child needs certain levels of supports. And at first the teacher just thought, oh, this child needs content support. And he's like, she doesn't need content support. How are grades? Great, fine. She doesn't need content support. She needs you to recognize that she's alone. And the pressures that come on her with her being alone.
So the parent went to the teacher?
Parent came to, went to the teacher.
Okay.
And then he and I spoke.
Interesting.
Yeah. So again, how do we create those networks? How do we help teachers to understand, which is a continuous learning process, the importance of that? Chris has touched on the program we're doing with Webster Rock Hill Ministries and the tutoring. That's been great.
Did we provide tutors for that program?
We provided a liaison that is working with the tutors in the program and the teachers in the schools to make sure that the children are getting learning supports that were aligned. And it's having a really, academically we haven't, I don't know testing wise, what any of that looks like. But the relationship, I've spoken with Ed Johnson, I've spoken with Tony Arnold. Most of the children that are accessing that program are from Avery. And it seems like it's going really well.
It was a success beyond what they thought it was going to be. I think they got a waiting list now.
Yeah, they're full.
The Reverend Wilson, he's super psyched. We were, I believe, the first school in St. Louis County to partner with the Freedom School. We're looking at how to make that a little bit, even extend it a little bit farther. The church right down the road, Peace United, is the church that did that, and Chris did a great job of working with them on curriculum and different stuff. So that their summer school program, which I can't even, me, I'm an emotional mess, with talking about kids. But it's grounded in development of self, social advocacy, and literacy. And so these kids were, they were learning literacy in the moment, but they were also getting on buses and going down to marches and stuff like that. It was really pretty cool. And so we're looking to see how we can kind of expand upon that and increase that level of opportunity to more kids. The We Stories, you probably saw We Stories throughout. Adelaide Lancaster is a part of our Equity Net. I talk with her on a fairly regular basis. We Stories, again, is a nonprofit local organization that supports families and children talking about race, and the program's designed for children that are under the age of 7. So our family, signed up for the program. Addison was beyond the age. Because a lot of the research that they build on is that, the bias is once you get to the age of 7 or beyond the age of 7, it's hard to go back. Not that we don't all learn and grow and stuff like that, but the brain and the experiences of kids very young are very influential on them. So that's where they focus all their efforts. Andrew Chow, we highlighted him. He's a local agent, insurance agent. He and I met. I know him from Rotary, and they give away, Farmers gives $500 to agents per month to dedicate for specific purposes. So through Andrew's generosity, through Farmers, we're buying $500 a month worth of literature that Adelaide and Chris work together to push that into schools for the kids in the classroom, and then also kids that go home for families. So the children and parents could, caregivers at home could read books, and there's different questions that they know to ask as discussion starters. So it's available to all of our children in our schools. The main focus is on especially targeting white families, because knowing that white families talk about race for various reasons a lot less than our families of color. Some out of necessity or just is. Safety, a lot of different reasons. I highlighted some of the different things. We got a lot of different things, studies, social justice opportunities. We've highlighted some of those. I'll kind of leave maybe the curricular stuff unless there's anything you're interested in. Sandy, you want to talk about just real briefly the poverty simulation that we were looking to bring next year to staff?
Yes, and so I mentioned it earlier in the year, really want to bring it to the staff and really get some direction related to it. But the simulation, in short, just provides an opportunity for us to be put in situations where you become one of a family, and then you are given the basic information about that family, and then you have to figure out how to survive, pretty much. 10 minutes is equal to about a week, so you just kind of move really quickly through that process. And every 10 minutes, you got to figure out how to solve your problem and figure out how to eat and take care of utilities, etc. It's a really eye-opening experience and allows you to really kind of be put in a place as if you were a child or an adult living under the poverty line. We've mentioned it to our administrators, district level team, and they are very interested themselves to be a part of that. I think it would be beneficial to have teachers a part of the process as well. And so that's just a question kind of now where we are. We pushed it out there just to our level and to the, again, to the administrators, not talk to teachers about it yet, but what are our next steps and how might we want that to look for 18-19, bringing it in. There is the company that did it with us, the Human Resources Association, was from Jefferson City, but there is a local company in Overland that will do it. It's different people, but it's pretty much the same process. And so that'll be our goal, is to try to figure out how to establish a process for doing that for 18-19, maybe starting with us and then involving teachers at some point or somehow of the process. Or maybe large, because you could do, I think there were 50 to 60 of us in the room when we did it. I don't know max number, I've not asked them that, but maybe it would be good if teachers were in there as well as administrators experiencing it all at the same time. Haven't really walked down that road, but those are some thoughts.
Are you familiar with Kingdom House? I know some kids that have done a poverty simulation with them. I think it's like an all-day Saturday, and they literally, how do you find a bus to get to the spot? And it seems like, if we can advertise all the places people could do it even on their own, because I think students can benefit from that just as much as administrators and teachers. So to just kind of publicize every opportunity that people have, just to be more aware of the challenges people face.
Maybe even PTOs.
Yeah, PTOs. Anybody that's interested in equity should just understand that trauma-based, discipline policies and all that, if they have no clue what some families live through. We were helping sponsor a Christmas family that she literally had 16 kids. And, they gave them mattresses and pillows and pillowcases, and some of them said they'd never had a bed. And, a 20-year-old who's never had a bed, that was just really eye-opening to me, and I think it can help people be just more aware.
Reach out to Junior Achievement, because when you look at the program that they provide the middle school for trying to get them ready for life, they give them a simulation of some household, and that's what you're talking about, those same simulations, and every criteria is different. Some end up having a job making maybe 6 figures, and some have a job making, maybe under $20,000. But they gotta have the same skills. How do I live within this means? But I think that type of junior achievement might be interested in something like that. Because they already have it set up. They've been out there. They got financial institutions, the grocery store, they got insurance companies, and those are the same things that the parents and or communities have to go through.
Thank you. Data usage, just one thing to highlight. Been looking at different data, warehouse systems and dashboards, and almost 100% we're going to move forward with Pulse, which partners well with Tyler SIS, our current SIS system, just in support of our use of data and information here. We've looked at a couple different ones and feel like for all of our departments, that's the one that would work best for us. So just kind of wanted to make you aware of that.
Now that housing all our data will be extracted in any method that we want.
It'll be really pretty solid.
Good.
Sandy, you want to touch on just kind of some of the stuff that you're doing
Sure.
briefly? Because I've read it.
So overall, the one major piece I want to highlight is our first Webster Grove School District Shares event that will be taking place on upcoming Saturday, the 13th. We are excited about it. It's our very first type of event. It's not necessarily a hiring fair, and as much as it is just a shares event for us to share who we are as a district, and for us to invite diverse teachers of color to come to our district to learn, for us to learn of them and for them to learn of us. So we really see it as a hopefully a partnership that we're hoping to develop with diverse teachers of color. What we hear oftentimes is that maybe sometimes people don't hear of Webster Groves, like where is Webster Groves? And then also, like, what do you believe as a district? We are wanting to attract those diverse candidates, and so we have pushed this information out to the colleges of education in our area, in addition to like the local, or on the college campuses, the diverse student population groups, like your Black Student Alliances. We pushed it out to them in addition to the different university student-teacher coordinators, plus to just teachers and educators that we know, just pushing it out, inviting them to come to learn about us. So we invite you guys, if you're able to just pop in to see. We'll have various breakout sessions that will talk about School for Today, our work on equity, what do we believe, our mission and vision, in addition to an actual resume review and then a mock interview for people. There's a lot of times when we interview people, we don't have the opportunity to give them feedback on their resume or, you know, tips on, we would apologize if you said this, right? We can't do those types of things. So this mock opportunity we're hoping will be good for people to bring their resume, for us to talk with them about it, give them tips, and then to do a quick, 2 to 3 minute interview, and then for someone to give them some feedback on how they interviewed in that process. So we're hoping that this will be an annual event that we can do. Uncertain always of how many openings we'll have, but in the interim, we're thinking about having a hiring fair, but it's difficult if you have one job opening and you want to have a whole hiring fair, right? You don't want to get people, anticipating opportunities when they're not there. So we're thinking the shares event will be something we can do just to continue to keep that line of communication and hopefully build, a database of qualified applicants so that when things come up, we can reach out to them and pull them back in. So that's what we're working on. Just want to highlight it.
When is that?
Have you had much interest in
Next
it
Saturday.
yet?
Next
Yes.
Saturday. We're at what time?
It's Steger.
Steger, it'll be from
9 to
9 to noon, yes. And we have had a lot of interest. We put it on our talent ad, on our website, Facebook, Twitter, it's everywhere. And so we've had people to register in addition to people calling in, and we're adding them to the list. So my hope is to get like 100 people. I think
We'll do it. We'll do it.
We'll do it. I think we're safely at around having about 40 who've actually registered. But when we look at our Eventbrite link, we've had over 100 views. So sometimes people don't register, but they're going to show. So that's where we are.
And Sandy's got a lot, some of those board goals that we had, one of them was on the talent, acquisition and development. So you'll keep getting updates, and highlighted here just some bullets on some of the partnerships that are taking place with universities, again, to try and create a pipeline of, teachers that we support and can ultimately hire to kind of do what Starsky says, is make our population represent, our teaching staff represent our population.
We're excited about that. We've got 3 universities that are going to allow us access to their sophomores, in addition to SLU, which talks about having a huge group of people who were pre-med, but then when they get to their junior year, they're like, either A, they're not, we don't want to do this, but their transcripts are filled with math and science, and so they have a program where they're trying to gear them potentially towards education. So we're hopefully partnering with them because, those AP classes, those honors calc classes, and those honors physics classes, some of those teachers are hard to come by. And so we're in the very beginning stages, but there's a number of universities that are just going to give us access starting 18-19, so we're very excited about that.
Thank you. John, how about you?
Sure, I'll highlight a few things from my area. One is that in November we had a number of staff Ambrose to the high school that went to a national trauma conference that was held here in St. Louis. It was run by Heather Forbes, who's like the guru in trauma informed. And it was a really great conference, and it's probably one of the best I've attended in my career. I mean, not just because of the information I was learning, but because of the diversity of our staff who went in terms of administrators, social workers, counselors, teachers, and having the side conversations with them about how we can better assist our students and help our students. And you know, one of the things that we talked about is just reframing how we view children who are misbehaving. You know, we all have times when we're you know, they use the word regulated and dysregulated. You know, everybody's regulated at points in times, everybody's dysregulated at points in time. And so, you know, when someone's in a dysregulated state, you've got to, you know, approach them in a little bit different way. So putting some things in place in schools that when our kids are in that dysregulated state to help them ease out of that so we can work with them in a positive way. So that the group who went, we met a few weeks later, like in December, we processed it and talked about next steps. So Dr. Dembo and I have done some research in a group that has been, because one of the things that came out was we need to do more training in this area and just more information out to staff in this area. And organization, a local organization that's been recommended to us by a number of school districts who's worked with them is called Live and Well STL. So Dr. Dembo and I have reached out to them, and we're going to be meeting with them in a couple of weeks to talk about how they can further spread this and share this information with our schools. We've also done a lot of work in restorative practices this year. As part of our membership with Character Plus, we reached out to them, Diane Sterling, who's their expert in this area. In December, came out and did a workshop with teams from the schools. Did a full-day workshop with us. That was really, really good, and talked again about kind of the key component of it is just that relationship building with students. And Character Plus also offers some in-depth, deep dive workshops for schools, a cohort academy model where schools go for multiple days and really go in depth with this. And Hudson just completed it, Edgar Road and Bristol are doing it this spring, and Grace Lee, the school that she was at, was one of the restorative model schools in St. Louis. So she's introducing all of that to Hickson. And then I know the high school is moving forward with it. I met with them on Wednesday, a group of folks, and so they're talking about next steps and how they can bring restorative practices to the high school. I think you're aware of this. The high school's developed with the ADL training that they've done. They've developed some sensitivity training for kids who have made poor choices in the area of discrimination or bias and so on. So as an alternative or as a component to the potential consequences that those students receive, they go through this sensitivity training that is provided by teachers who have gone through that ADL training. I've worked with elementary principals a lot this year on the student discipline, and as you recall, the policy subcommittee is breaking out the JG policy that was just general K through 12 into like an elementary, middle school, and high school version. The focus has been elementary, and we're going to make the recommendation to the subcommittee that with the exception of something really serious in terms of a safety issue or if we're mandated by safe schools, that we're not going to suspend elementary students K through third grade. So that's something that will be happening soon. And then last year we started looking at our MOU with the police department, the Webster Groves Police Department, that defines our school resource officers, and we did some tweaking to that. And I know Dr. Simpson has had some meetings with the police chief, and he and I will continue to dialogue with the police department, which will better define the role of our resource officers in our buildings.
Kathy, you want to share one of yours? And
Sure.
close it out?
Just quickly,
my office is very conscious of ensuring that all our publications, our photos, our online presence reflect the diversity in the district, including our new Facebook feature that Arden Armstrong is working on, which is the teacher feature. It's very popular.
Just featured Dr.
Yeah,
Fields back there.
She just got that this week.
Mr. Officer Baker's not too happy about that feature.
Focus on the basketball off.
Basketball,
Yeah.
school and Officer Baker, yeah.
We also this year, looking for student accomplishments that we can send to our different cities, so that they can include in their newsletters, and most recently we had something about this in Rock Hill, and that was great.
Which is great, and they're excited to get those from
And
us.
they were very happy to get that, to include in the news.
The one thing that I just want to highlight, we listed a bunch of schools, is that Grace is doing a lot. She's actually does training for Alive, STL. I mean, she's a social worker by trade. She's a resident, restorative circles, practices expert. She's really good. She has initiated a student leadership summit for middle school students. It's all around equity, voice inclusion, being heard. And in April has organized for students from our schools, from Normandy, from Parkway, from Clayton, and from Maplewood, Richmond Heights to all come together on that topic, organize a speaker, and the kids were all gonna kind of get together and talk and, what can they do? So really pretty neat. There's a lot there. The intent in putting this, and sometimes this gets misinterpreted, not a lot, but is not to say that we're doing enough, because we're not doing enough. It's not to say like this will get at it, we'll arrive at all those outcomes like Reverend Wilson said, but it's to demonstrate kind of things that we've initiated this year. The intent is to create something that will also show all the things that had already been initiated as well, so that at least people can see what we're doing. Because a lot of times people will be like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're doing a lot. And I'll rattle off some things, but there's a lot of things that don't get hit on. And so it's also a spot where we can direct people to. We'll share with the Equity and Ed Committee. We'll push it out to students. We'll push it out to different people as well.
So where will people find this?
We could put this particular document, we could put it up on the website. We could push it out through social media. We'll send it directly to some people, push it through blog. But it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot that's been initiated. And again, it's not just, it's a lot of systemic structural type stuff too.
Can we consider, this is a lot and all good stuff, but, I think the most important thing is to get it out to the community at large.
Yeah.
Because a parent that doesn't have a kid, a student, not going to go to our website.
Yeah.
Look, I think it's
Kathy,
worth
let's talk about how to do that.
Yeah, to get it out, in the newspaper, on social media, whatever, so it can be widely read.
And of course, communicate that it's a work in progress.
Yeah,
You said
right.
We don't.
But it will
Aren't
answer
saying
some of
this is an
those
idea.
questions, you're not doing anything. Oh, yes, we are, here it is. And I have one other question, is that the Social Justice Club, is that a new club in the?
It's, they either started last year or the year before last.
At the very end of last year.
And they are, it was recent, so end of last year. They're planning a pretty special week in a couple weeks. Been kind of helping Julie Burchett, who leads it, and some others with kind of some different ideas and things that they can do. And the students who are part of the ADL, they've already facilitated work for the Equity and Ed Committee, did a beautiful job. They're going to do it also with the Bristol Equity Group, maybe the broader group, but I've been reached out to by the Bristol group. And then they're also going to be going to classrooms shortly. So that'll be really good.
John, I had made the point to you that a PDF wasn't searchable, so I could have trouble finding the discipline section. And this whole document, it seems like if somebody searches for equity on the website, can this document appear? If somebody, is interested in these issues, how do we direct them to this?
In the toolbar at the top, we put it under.
We could put under the equity link, yeah. That's where our resolution is.
Just to make it easier for people to find this, because it is a 12-page document, and then to find any, if somebody's interested in swastikas in high school, where do they go?
Right.
Are they thinking, oh, I'll go look for more documents, or is there a way to say, this is a sensitivity training that's related to these incidents?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I wanted to jump, and kind of closing with this presentation, 2 things. First of all, kind of, responding to expressions of hate. Certainly we have, it's not something that's not happened at the high school before. It certainly happened before, but we have certainly seen an escalation in those expressions. Sometimes, we're able to catch the person. Sometimes we know that through our conversations and through development and training. 'Cause high school did a really good job of creating a module where different teachers collaborated on a module to not just discipline the child with out-of-school consequences, coupled with in-school suspension, but they have to participate in this training that gets at the acts of racism, as of hate, their effects on people. So we know some children, they definitely have some of these things in their heart. I believe it's learned. So trying to support them. Sometimes we have children who are, which sometimes happens, a part of the group that is actually typically specifically targeted by that image. So similar to what, you've seen out of Parkway with, the writing on the mirror, that was done by a student who was a part of. Anyway, it's not always, it doesn't always come because I have hate for those people. Sometimes it definitely does. Sometimes it's, will somebody do something about this? Some of it is, so there's different reasons. Regardless, how it's received by people, if I walk into the room, is through hate, right? And so, so it's one of the things that we've certainly seen an increase. We've got a lot of things proactively that are in place that are listed there. We're also trying to be proactive with speaking to kids. So some of our conversations are proactive. Some of them may be seen as reactive, depending on these images. We've had about 5 or 6 images. The reaction that we are currently giving, every time it comes to us, the administration, they treat it really seriously, really seriously. They investigate. They are, what we didn't share with kids necessarily yesterday is that the administrators, like on the hour, are combing the bathrooms at the school because this is usually where they're showing up. It's really easy if a kid writes in the middle of the hallway, we got cameras there. We don't have cameras when they're going to the bathroom. So they really work to try and use cameras, talk to teachers to try and narrow the gap so that we can find out when was it done. We did have an incident earlier in the year, I think I shared with you before in an email, where there was an image that was posted by the Little Theater. A teacher was told about it by the student in the moment, and the reaction was to get it off the wall, which isn't necessarily a bad reaction, but there wasn't a follow-up with administration, and there wasn't an effort to try and figure out who'd done it. And then we didn't find out about that till a month later. Unfortunately, some of it got into social media, and there was discussion.
We meaning who, central office?
Administrators, high school administrators didn't know about it for a month. And so the child then shared with the mom for a month, and then, and so that's kind of happened. So it's a little hard when it's a month down the road to try and to figure it out, especially if cameras, you don't know when it was. Was it a month? Was it 3 weeks? But so they do a lot to try and to find out. We are doing these administrative talks, proactive, reactive, depending on when you look at it. They've gone into the rooms to talk about equity. We certainly went into the rooms. I covered some rooms to talk about, just being outraged by these acts, what we need to do, what I would call you to do. These are ways you can do it. Kind of the message, and thanks to Arnold for coming yesterday, that we gave to the students is there's a lot of ways to respond to this. I showed them the app that has the way that I didn't physically break out my phone, but told them about the app where they can anonymously or share their information with us, take a picture, report a statement, anything like that. We've communicated with families. We've had posts on our website and Facebook. One of the things that we haven't done this thus far, which, that I've gotten criticized for, the high school has gotten criticized for, is that every time you find something, sending it out to everybody, sending out an email to everybody that you found it and kind of denouncing it as such. I've spoken with, sometimes, if it happens in a bathroom, it's fresh because our administrators are on there. Now, they're not going into the night. We had one that occurred sometime in the night. We actually found that person because there aren't a lot of people in the hallways tonight. So we don't, there was one image that Dr. Clark's like, it could have been there for 8 to 10 years where it was found. It wasn't a very public visible spot, but it was found. We haven't had the practice thus far of communicating and denouncing it every time. I've spoken with different districts. I've actually spoken with people in the media. I've spoken with organizations that support us in equity work and other people, and none of them has encouraged me to do it every single time.
How often is this happening?
About 5, there's been about 5 images written.
What images?
Swastikas.
Okay.
KKK was written once. We've had 2 posts in social media. Well, those are easy. That's easy to find.
Yeah.
That's 5 like this school year?
This school year. So that's what it is. What we've seen, and again, there haven't been tons. Now we're still dealing with things. Like I told the kids yesterday, like, yeah, there's images, there's bad, they're getting notoriety, but we still have like subtle comments that are made, like biased jokes that are made, anything like that. So I also spoke to them about that's not okay either. But in terms of those images and stuff, and those are often unreported.
And have we clearly acknowledged and denounced these images as hate speech?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now what we haven't done, Amy, thus far, is we have done it within the high school. I wrote a blog. I didn't use the term of hate speech probably about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. We haven't, to the entire district, blasted something out. At the Webster Kirkwood Times, some of us were quoted in it. But district-wide, we have yet to do that, and I'm certainly open to do that if we think we need to.
Well, and in terms of discipline though, is the student discipline policy, does this fall under hate speech and student discipline policy? I think that's and that's not something that the public can know, but you guys.
We're using our policy to discipline these kids. Some people, yeah. So we're absolutely doing that. What we've seen is that with some of these images, we seem to have more after kind of the spotlight was cast on it and was shared. One thing that we had is somebody wrote a swastika and wrote like, please put this on the news. So again, my intent is not to, our intent, not mine, our intent is not to like hide it. Like I'm not trying to protect like this image like we've got this squeaky clean, perfect, unbiased community, because we don't. Some people feel like that's what our intent is because maybe they don't hear it enough. Yeah. So there's no clear-cut way, and believe me, I've spoken with experts who deal with, and so there's no like right answer. So I'm open to anybody's feedback, critique, criticism.
I'm just focusing on this one particular area, the discipline issue.
Yeah.
Has it been communicated to the students that regardless of what you think this means or what you intend when you write it, it is hate speech and these are the consequences? Because I think initially there was some question about, oh, maybe they didn't mean it as this, and that message needs to be conveyed to them.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not, there's no ambiguity there.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like, Arnold, what do you think? Do you feel like that was communicated to them yesterday? I know we've been into their classrooms. I know I can speak for myself. We talked about kids who write this regardless of intent, would be disciplined.
I wouldn't say those words were used yesterday, per se. I think it was really structured for more, and I thought one of the most valuable comments that was made was that the only people that seem to report this are the people who are the recipients of this. And so everybody needs to report this. Everybody needs to speak out about this rather than just allow a certain group who are targeted. I don't know that, I don't know previous communication, but yesterday, that wasn't, like you just said, that wasn't communicated in that manner. I think it was spoken that this is something we need everyone's help with. It is not tolerated But to go to the extent to say this is hate speech and we will deal with this in this manner was not, I didn't hear that communicated that way, so.
That's something need to be in our student handbook.
It is. I mean, there's a discipline.
Kind of bold it out, I guess.
We've, as of yesterday, we had gotten some, a lot of favorable feedback. It was cool to get some emails from kids, but there's also some, actually just from one teacher thus far, and everyone's going to receive it differently, but that was one of the things that she had expressed the same thing, is being more stern about the consequence. So there was discussion of serious follow-up consequences, but it wasn't, maybe as you described, or.
And I know I've mentioned to John.
We talked about following up, I'm sorry, we talked about following up going into classrooms, and I could certainly, because I now know how to communicate with all the kids, so like we're collecting all this information, we're gonna process it and communicate again.
Go ahead.
Can we ask our student representatives if they think it's been well-informed, as if there's a way to communicate it? Because maybe even a story in the Echo could make more clear to students what our policy is. But I think Trinity and Joe might have some helpful advice.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing that we'll communicate will be if there are any other incidents or the number of incidents that occur. But I kind of view it, and I mentioned this to John previously, I kind of view this as it's very similar to sexual harassment or any other kind of harassment. You deal with it swiftly and severely. And if it's all kind of umbrellaed that way, then you're sending the message, this is nonsense. So don't try it.
So a very clear line in the sand.
Very clear line, right.
That's one of the things in our talks with the kids that came up more, is more kids see things based on gender, sexual type comments that are made than anything related to race. And so I tried to build that in some of my what yesterday, and I had a finite amount of time in which to talk to them. It would have been great to have more time and hopefully communicate some more messages, but that seems to be something that again needs more attention. I'm talking to high school administrators about that. A lot of the comments that are made in the hallways, the cat calls, stuff like that, that came up a lot. That came up a lot more with the kids actually when in my classrooms, as well as the other administrators' classrooms.
And that
not good.
Shouldn't be tolerated either.
No, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Just the same.
The safe environment we need to stress.
Yeah.
And that was stressed yesterday, very heavily.
Yeah.
I like the concept you guys took to get that out to the kids.
Yeah.
They do it even at the beginning of the school year. I think that one-on-one conversation.
Yesterday, the students were really, really attentive.
Yeah.
They were very attentive.
Good.
They hadn't been called. John Raimondo had been there for 28 years, and they'd never been called together for something like that. So I think that says something too about this is a big deal. But we are going to follow up. I'm getting feedback. I'm listening to your feedback on how to keep it going, how to follow up with things that may have been missed or not stressed enough. We had a couple kids that also presented, did a great job speaking about not tolerating it.
And John's personal comments about Luke were, I think, very effective for the students to hear. And his communication about how can he explain to his son some of the things that are going to happen to him based upon his background that John has no experience with. I think that hit home with several people.
And then we still do the taping for the beginning of the year for the PTO, the school meeting.
We need the tape in.
You mean for the kickoff, for the open house table?
We still do that.
It's been, we didn't do it this year.
Well, if you did do it, that'll be another perfect time
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
emphasize that in your
Yeah.
comments too, so the parent bodies will hear it all at the same time as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's no more than that.
Yeah. So the district level, what I was proposing, kind of related to some of this, and again, it blends in with some of our convergence of a few things. First of all is to develop a plan whereby every member has equity training and social justice and equity. We have a tremendous amount of stuff going on. We have a large percentage of our faculty that, because we've been doing this, a lot of training, a long time, actually a year before I got here, but we don't have a plan necessarily that speaks to everyone. It's a necessity. In the past, it used to be a choice because there involved summer level work, and we got a lot of people because a lot of people were interested. But if you didn't have to. You didn't have to. So we do have things that go on during the school day, but nothing to the same level of intensity as to what that is. So what I want to do is develop a plan that requires everybody to do that. So we may not, we can't necessarily force people in the summer, but we can develop things during the school year where everyone has to participate. For the past 4 years, all of our second year faculty have gone through the training. But something that provides everyone with common language, common framework for discussion, and then kind of like, that's some of the personal development, but then also structure a PD plan of sorts that supports everybody in the context of their job. So how does this equity, how does my understanding of privilege, how does my awareness, how does it transfer to my actual job? And that's one thing that we work to do, but I'd like to be more intentional with how we develop faculty with that.
I would like you to add board members to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no reason.
And now we're going to find everybody.
Yeah.
That would be, speaking about for MSBA, that would be a great module for the MSBA beginning board member, and even like a workshop at the conference. I've not really seen anything like that.
No, I haven't either.
And that would be a really nice thing for maybe we could put together
That'd
to
be great.
present,
That would be great.
because it's really needed everywhere.
I agree.
I haven't seen it either.
The other thing I wanted to initiate this year, this kind of comes through, I've been working in the fall to try and find somebody to do some of our work, which is why I want to actually put an RFQ below to help us with having a more thorough plan in terms of a systemic approach to how we attack equity. We're doing it, we're doing all these kinds of things, but there's not necessarily like this, what I propose, and I'm not looking exactly for this, but I found that school districts don't have really good plans, but universities do, and I think a lot of that has to do because they have like offices.
Yeah, but then the language, yeah.
But through that work, I connected with Pam Washington from Clark, and Pam is connected to Dr. Donna Ford, who is, one of my, educational, she's big in our business, and her expertise is dealing with acceleration, remediation, special education, family engagement, and such. And she isn't somebody, through discussions with her, that probably would be the person to facilitate the strategic work necessarily, but she does work with different school districts across the country. She's out of Vanderbilt University. So my proposal, and this kind of aligns with kind of our gifted reevaluation process, which is a multi-year thing, is to propose something to Dr. Ford where she supports us in looking at our academic acceleration programming in grades K through 12. So it would support our gifted programming, but it's also looking at how do we identify, recognize, and support kids at all of our levels. And Pam actually knows her through her dissertation work, because part of my worry is like, oh my gosh, she's an icon. Icons usually cost a lot of money. She wouldn't tell us what the cost would be, so she said, you propose to me what you think is fair, and I'll let you know if I think it's fair. And Pam thinks we can get her a discount. But I'd like to kind of move forward with that. We have money within our budget. We're not going to go outside of our budget, my superintendent budget, to do this. So that's something I'd like to propose this year. And the other thing is...
Before you move on to that, will that eliminate anything that you had planned to do with your superintendent budget besides this?
No.
Because I'm all in favor of increasing the special line item we have in the budget for equity. I mean, if this is something that's advancing that particular subject matter.
Money well spent.
We put that money in, make an adjustment, put that money in the budget so you have it.
And that comes to the next item, which would require some additional funding. And I had reached out with a lot of local school districts, people, again, we called, sat down and talked to Dr. Ford, people to try and get at what we're trying to accomplish. And again, it's a limited number of people. People are like really excited, that's really cool, that's really this, but I've never done that. Here's what I can do. And I just wasn't that comfortable because really, it's really looking at, getting to this equity piece is a complex systemic problem that requires a focused, complex systemic approach, which we've initiated, which we're trying to do, but I think it really requires something really strategic, really laid out, really clear, And so what my proposal is to create what we're looking to accomplish, kind of like Bruce kind of went through with the comprehensive facilities plan. And then ultimately have a group of us that review it, board representation on there with the people that we want to proceed with that work. Initiating as soon as we can after July 1st when we have to think about budget adjustments and the money that's involved, possibly.
I have a question. The strategic plan process in general needs more measurable goals, I think. And this seems to be related. So how will this fit in with the whole overall district plan?
What I thought is that I feel like what is created would be the body or the bulk of our strategic focus as a school system. And then I've thought, we still, we're always going to have a goal of let's spend our money wisely. Like we can find a way to articulate some of those goals that will always be. But when we look in here and we started talking about culture and climate, talent development, and here what they have is they lay out specific things that are clear process goals, which are more accomplishments, and then what are the data goals that you also hope to attain. And I think our current strategic plan, I like the themes, I like it. It's so huge, it's so vast.
It's not focused.
It's not focused enough, and it's not manageable. Like when you think of all that we do on a day-to-day basis, and you had some of these big things, So I feel like we're still doing work that aligns with it, but the way it was written and designed and as such, So I see this serving as the primary plan for our school system and somehow having to wrap in those other goals that will be.
So how can we draw community into this process is, I guess, part of my question.
In the nature of time, I'm not going to go into it, but if you look at this, they as part of the Michigan plan, they developed a significant amount of time looking at analyzing particular data, and they, in their plan, had like a total of 80 community meetings. Well, 80 community, but again, that's part of that data information gathering. It's part of what's the current state of our community and our school system. So it's really, to my idea, has to be embedded as a part of the process, and it can't just be put a survey out, or it can't just be who wants to come to be a part of the process, because you're going to get the people who have always benefited from the system who show up. Maybe well-intentioned, but I don't have necessarily the capacity to see some of the existing inequities, or, you know what I'm saying? So I believe that comes through this, and as we develop a proposal that articulates that, we'll see who out there, what organizations out there can support us with that.
Quick comment question. That listing that you made was very, very good. It's more inclusive than I had imagined. The question, I guess, comes from the variety of things that we're doing, and I don't necessarily need measurable effectiveness, but sometimes, like he was saying, sometimes some things have to go, or maybe some things weren't great and then they lost their effectiveness. Do we get enough feedback to know that maybe this has reached its lifespan, or maybe it's just it's getting its lifespan? And then the transference from here to here for staff and putting that into the classroom, because man, if you can start to change hearts, that's where it's at. But that's difficult to do. And I'm just kind of wondering what our effectiveness of the programs have been, and are there other things, because I know I mentioned to you that character ed for kids is great, but staff need character ed too.
Yeah. We're trying to, and the hopes is, we're trying to with the system the spreadsheet that we've collected and sharing with principals and stuff. We have on that spreadsheet students that are engaged in interventions. We know what interventions are. So as we don't have a good, so we're looking to increase those conversations and use of data and information at the school level where it needs to occur most. But then once we come around to like our next level of, and I'm not a live and die NWA person, but it is something that every kid's taking, that we can then look at that information, who are the kids that were in interventions, and we can say, hey, look, you need to see, is what we're doing working or not? with
Yeah,
that child?
and I was talking about like the PD for
Yeah.
staff, like
Yeah.
all those things. Have they been as effective as we think they've been in helping people understand, wow, this is different, I didn't think about that, or I need to change my practices? That's kind of where I was going.
Yeah, I think we could probably look at that a little bit more. It's really hard because you could
Yeah.
have a super great training in literacy, but if you don't have that heart and believe that all kids can learn,
Right.
so it's really hard, The outcome is, what leads to the outcome is so multivariate, so it's really hard to pinpoint that A, let B always, but that's something that we can keep talking about and get better in, because we don't have that, I think. Yeah. That's it for that. For now.
All right, comments, questions? Thank you, this is obviously a ongoing conversation, that's a good start. I think we need a motion to, we need to do
Consent agenda.
consent agenda, thank you.
I make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 3.02 and 3.03.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And then I need a motion to adjourn into executive session.
I make a motion that we recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal and personnel matters.
We need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll take a break.
We'll go quick.
Okay.
Quick.
All right.
Dave, thanks for coming.
What are you gonna do, go over and take a nap?